The Paradox of Choice. Part 1. The Vortex of Choice. The lights of the shopping mall shimmered like an artificial galaxy, stretching endlessly over shelves overflowing with merchandise. John stood in the middle of an aisle, his eyes darting back and forth, trying to find something simple. His task was to buy a shirt, a task that seemed so mundane it was boring. But now it had become a nightmare. Men's shirts, a bright red neon sign greeted him. Ahead was a forest of shirts. Long-sleeve shirts, short-sleeve shirts, shirts with wing collars, mandarin collars, spread collars. The fabrics were endless. Cotton, linen, silk, khaki, polyester. The colors were countless. Pure white, off-white, cream white, royal blue, navy blue, cobalt blue, cobalt blue, cobalt blue. The patterns were diverse. Stripes, plaid, polka dots, subtle textures. Everything seemed available, just waiting for him to make a decision. John started with enthusiasm. Great, he thought to himself. With so many options, I'm sure to find the perfect shirt. He picked up the first pure white cotton shirt, its fabric smooth and the fit sharp. Then he put it down when he saw another, an off-white one that seemed more elegant. After that came a light blue one, then a striped one. He gradually became lost in the details, the thickness of the fabric, the style of the buttons, the stitching of the collar. Every shirt had its own unique advantage, and each advantage made the others seem less appealing. 20 minutes passed, and he was still in the same spot, surrounded by a disorganized pile of shirts in his arms and on the shelves. The initial enthusiasm was gone, replaced by a sense of confusion and dread. His brain began to overload. If I choose this one, will I have missed out on a better shirt over there? That blue shirt seems to go better with jeans, but the white one is easier to match. The striped one is formal, but the plain one is more sophisticated. Each choice wasn't an addition, but a subtraction. He had fallen into the trap of the paradox of choice. This paradox, popularized by psychologist Barry Schwartz, challenges the modern societal belief that more choices lead to greater happiness. Schwartz argued that when faced with an overwhelming number of options, we not only become insecure, but also feel less satisfied with our decisions. John's dilemma was just a small example. He wasn't just choosing a shirt. He was weighing dozens of possibilities, dozens of what-if shirts waiting for him on other shelves. The pressure to find the absolute best had overshadowed the simple joy of shopping. Finally, after almost an hour, he made a decision. He grabbed the first shirt he had held, the pure white cotton one. He went straight to the checkout counter, not daring to look back, afraid that another shirt would make him regret his choice. But as he left the store, he didn't feel satisfied. Instead, a vague anxiety crept into his mind. Was that blue shirt really better? Part 2. The Burden of Opportunity Cost. John's anxiety was not unfounded. It had a scientific name, opportunity cost. Every time we make a choice, we simultaneously give up all other options. When there are only 2 or 3 options, the opportunity cost is small, almost negligible. But when the number of choices reaches dozens or hundreds, the opportunity cost becomes a huge psychological burden. John went home and hung the white shirt in his closet. But every time he opened the closet, his eyes were drawn to that shirt, and his mind replayed the image of the blue shirt he had passed up. His white shirt was beautiful, well made, and fit perfectly, but he couldn't fully enjoy it. His joy was eroded by the nagging feeling that I could have had a better shirt. He no longer saw the white shirt as a useful item, but as a testament to his indecisiveness and a potential mistake. "What's wrong with you?" his wife Sarah asked when she saw him sitting lost in thought on the sofa. "I went to buy a shirt, but I don't know if I chose the right one," John sighed. "What's the big deal? That shirt looks great." "It is, but There were hundreds of others. Could there have been a more perfect one? Was I too hasty? Sarah gently took his hand. John, I've been there. I wanted to buy a new phone. At first, I just thought about getting a good phone. But then I started reading hundreds of reviews, watching comparison videos, learning about the camera, battery, processor. I spent a whole week looking for the perfect phone. In the end, I chose one, but I still kept thinking about the other one. Every time I opened my phone, I remembered the features the other one had and felt regretful. So what happened? John asked. I realized that my phone was good enough. It did everything I needed. My unhappiness wasn't because the phone was bad, but because I was too focused on what I had given up. I let the opportunity cost erode my happiness. Sarah's story touched on a core issue. The burden of opportunity costs doesn't just exist in major decisions, but in small, daily ones. It prevents us from living fully in the present. We are always looking back at the roads not taken, at the possibilities not chosen, and comparing them to the path we are on. When there are too many options, the number of things we have missed increases exponentially, making post-decision regret almost inevitable. John looked at the white shirt hanging in his closet. It wasn't a bad shirt. It just simply wasn't all the other shirts. Part 3. The Demon of Perfection. The Maximizer. The conversation with Sarah made John realize something even more frightening. He might be a maximizer, someone who always tries to find the absolute best option in any situation. Modern society encourages us to be maximizers. Advertisements, rankings, social media reviews all push us to find the best stuff. The phone with the best camera, the best restaurant in the city, the most perfect vacation spot. These messages make us believe that perfection exists somewhere, and it's our duty to find it. This pressure turns every decision into a competition, a test that we must pass. In contrast to maximizers are satisficers, people who simply look for a good enough option. A satisficer would have chosen the first shirt they liked and been happy with it. They don't waste energy comparing, they aren't haunted by opportunity cost. They're happier and less anxious. John realized that he had spent his whole life trying to be a maximizer, and it had cost him a lot of joy. John began to reflect on the major decisions of his life. Choosing a university. He had spent months researching, comparing programs, and evaluating post-graduation job prospects. In the end, he chose a good school, but the fear that he had missed a better opportunity at another school always lingered. Choosing a job, he had turned down many offers because he thought he could find a position with a higher salary and better benefits, and he eventually chose a job that he thought was the best at the time. But then he constantly compared his salary to his friends and his career opportunities to others. He was never truly satisfied. John realized that being a maximizer wasn't inherently bad. It pushed him to work harder and achieve more success. But it came at a steep price: stress, anxiety, and a never-ending feeling of dissatisfaction. He was always in an invisible race, and even when he won, he didn't feel happy. So how do I become a satisficer? John asked Sarah. I think you don't have to be a satisficer in everything, Sarah replied. Just know when to be one. Sometimes for small decisions like buying a shirt, good enough is all you need. Accept that nothing is absolutely perfect and enjoy what you have. Sarah's advice was like a fresh breeze blowing into John's mind. He started to see things from a different perspective. His white shirt wasn't a wrong choice, it was just a choice, and it was good enough. Sustainment 4. The digital footprint. The rise of technology and social media has amplified the paradox of choice to a new level. John realized that his days of searching for perfection were not limited to a single store, but continued in the digital realm. He recalled the times he had searched for a restaurant for dinner. Instead of choosing a place he had eaten at and liked, he would go online, read hundreds of reviews on apps, look at pictures of the food, and compare prices and ambiance. He wanted to find the most worthwhile restaurant. As a result, he and Sarah would waste hours just to pick a location. And when they arrived, no matter how delicious the food was, he couldn't stop thinking about another restaurant with even higher ratings. Social media had become a battleground for the paradox of choice. Every photo, every post was a deliberate choice to present a perfect version of life. John saw his friends posting pictures from luxurious trips, eating beautiful meals, living a life he thought was enviable. This created immense pressure, forcing him to constantly compare his life to those curated images. Did I choose the right path? Is my life interesting enough? These questions became a part of his daily thought.
The friendship paradox, when your friends seem more popular than you. Have you ever scrolled through social media and seen your friends constantly appearing in large group photos, at bustling parties, and in the friend lists of countless other people? Have you ever felt a vague sense of unease, an unintentional comparison? Why do my friends seem to have more friends than I do? This feeling isn't just a fleeting thought. It can burrow into your mind, planting a seed of insecurity. It makes you question yourself, whether you're too introverted, if you're living a boring life, or if you're simply less popular. The truth is, you are not alone, and that feeling is not an illusion. It's a real phenomenon known as the friendship paradox. This is an astonishing paradox, a statistical truth that our intuition struggles to accept. On average, your friends have more friends than you do. This might sound illogical, even like a cruel joke from the universe, but it has been proven by mathematics and network science. It is not a flaw in how we perceive ourselves, but an inherent characteristic of how social networks are formed. This paradox is not just a mathematical curiosity. It is a mirror that directly reflects our deepest fears and insecurities, especially in a world where personal worth seems to be measured by the number of connections and interactions. It forces us to re-examine the nature of relationships, comparison, and our own selves. Is it possible to find peace in a world built on numbers and comparisons? And can this truth help us free ourselves from the burden of popularity? Part 1. The harsh truth and the social network problem. Back then, I was a student full of ideals. I believed that all relationships were based on equality, that friendship was a bond connecting two people with similar values. I had a close-knit group of friends. We would hang out, confide in each other, and share everything in our lives. In our group, there was a friend named Anne. Anne was outgoing, had a great sense of humor, and was always full of energy. She seemed to know everyone on campus. Every time I was with Anne, I'd see her greeting, shaking hands, and chatting with so many people I didn't know. I used to think Anne is so lucky she can connect with the world so easily. That feeling often made me feel small. Anne had 100 friends on social media, while I only had 30. Anne was always invited to lively parties, while I was only invited to intimate, cozy gatherings. I wondered, was Anne a better friend than me, or was she simply better than me in some way? The friendship paradox emerged as a cold but accurate explanation. It was discovered by sociologist Scott L. Feld in 1991. Feld presented a simple yet powerful mathematical argument. In a social network, when you randomly select a person, there's a chance they have fewer friends than the network's average. But when you randomly select one of their friends, that friend has a higher chance of being one of the people with more friends than the network's average. Why this difference? Imagine a small city. Within it, there are a few wide main roads that connect all the areas, and there are hundreds, thousands of small alleys that serve only a few houses. If you randomly select a road, you might pick an alley. But if you randomly select a person and ask them, "Where do you live?" and then asked what road is nearby, the chances are high that they'll point to a main road. Why? Because more people use the main roads, so the probability of you meeting someone on one is higher.
In a social network, people with many friends are like the main roads. They are the hubs connecting many other people. Your relationship with them is like a small alley connecting to a main road. Therefore, when you look at your friends, you tend to look at these hubs more often. Because popular people have a huge number of connections. They have more opportunities to become your friend than an introverted person with only a few close friends. This is a simple statistical bias, completely unrelated to your personal worth or attractiveness. Understanding this paradox is like seeing a hidden matrix in everyday life. My feeling when comparing myself to Anne was not a flaw in me, but an accurate reflection of how our networks were structured. Anne was not a better friend than me. Anne was simply a hub, and I was one of her many connections. And that is a completely different distinction. Part 2. The psychology of comparison in the digital age. If this paradox were just a statistical problem, it would not have such a powerful impact. Its true power lies in how it affects the human psyche in the digital age. Social media has become a perfect platform for the friendship paradox to unleash its full potential for harm. Every day, we scroll through personal profiles not to connect deeply, but to see a curated and polished summary of other people's lives. We see pictures of our friends on luxurious trips, at bustling parties, and in the friend lists of countless other people. We don't see the rainy days, the exhausting work hours, or the lonely moments they also experience. And this is where the friendship paradox begins its destruction. Because your friends tend to be more popular than you will see more of their photos from glamorous events. You will see more of their posts about successes and joys shared with countless others. This creates a powerful illusion. Everyone is living a more interesting life than I am. I once fell into this trap. I had another friend named Bing, a handsome and talented guy. Bing's social media was full of photos of him meeting celebrities, going on volunteer trips to distant places, and showcasing his academic achievements. Looking at it, I felt a simmering envy. I saw my life as small and mundane. While I was at home reading a book, Bing was exploring the world. While I was struggling with my own small problems, Bing was doing great things. I didn't realize that Bing was also another hub. The life I saw on social media was just a small, carefully selected part of his life. I didn't see the pressures Bing faced, the difficulties he had to overcome to achieve those successes. I let the friendship paradox deceive me, making me believe that my comparison was logical and my life was lacking. Psychological studies have shown that this social comparison is one of the main causes of anxiety, depression, and feelings of inadequacy. When we are ambushed by the amplified images of the paradox, we begin to believe that we are an exception, a flawed individual in a society full of successful and happy people. But the friendship paradox reminds us that such a comparison is unfair. It's like comparing a small alley to a highway. Both have their own value, both serve their own purpose, but they cannot be measured on the same scale. And that, in a way, relieved me and helped me accept myself a little more. Part 3. Practical applications and a deeper meaning. The friendship paradox is not limited to a puzzling truth about personal lives. It has become a powerful tool with surprising practical applications, proving that the seemingly most insignificant things can bring great benefits to society. One of the most notable applications is in public health. Imagine a pandemic breaks out, and health authorities need to vaccinate the community quickly and effectively. Vaccinating the entire population is impossible, so how do you stop the spread? The friendship paradox provided a clever solution. Instead of randomly selecting people for vaccination, scientists used this paradox to identify the hubs in the social network. They would randomly select a few people and then ask them to randomly select one of their friends, and they would vaccinate those friends. Why is this more effective? Because the friends who were selected were highly likely to be the popular hubs, the people with the most social connections.
By vaccinating them, scientists created a protective barrier around the network, preventing the virus from spreading from these hubs to others. This method has been shown to be able to predict and slow the spread of a disease more effectively than random vaccination. The applications of this paradox are not limited to healthcare. In the field of computer and network science, it helps researchers understand how information spreads. Our popular friends not only have more friends, but they are also more likely to be exposed to new information, breaking news, or a new trend. By focusing on these hubs, scientists can predict and track the spread of news, fake news, or a market trend. Even in business, the friendship paradox is valuable. A company that wants to promote a new product, instead of randomly selecting a group of people for a trial, can use this paradox to reach the most influential people in their social networks. These hubs, with their powerful information spreading ability, can help the company's product reach a large number of potential customers quickly. The friendship paradox teaches us a profound lesson. A network is not a collection of isolated nodes, but a complex ecosystem where some nodes have more influence than others. By understanding this mechanism, we can not only explain our own personal feelings, but also leverage it to create positive impacts on a large scale. Part 4. Overcoming the comparison trap and finding true meaning. The truth about the friendship paradox can, at first, cause a sense of discomfort. It might make you feel truly small and inadequate. But when you look deeper, you will see that this paradox is not a criticism, but a liberation. It liberates you from the burden of comparison. My feeling of insecurity when looking at Anne's or Bing's profiles was no longer a reflection of my self-worth.
The paradox of tolerance. When open-mindedness becomes a mortal wound. In an ideal society, tolerance is the foundation of all relationships, a promise of freedom and mutual respect. We pride ourselves on our ability to listen to all perspectives, accept differences, and build a space where every voice is valued. But what happens when a voice, an ideology, begins to use that very tolerance as a weapon to destroy it? What happens when an open, free society is confronted by a force that declares it will not be tolerant of anyone else once it holds power? This is not a hypothetical question. This is the paradox of tolerance, one of the most haunting and profoundly influential philosophical ideas of the 20th century. Introduced by the philosopher Karl Popper in 1945, this paradox shook our core beliefs about freedom, fairness, and democracy. It forces us to confront a difficult truth. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance, and a society, to survive, must be willing to become intolerant of intolerance itself. To fully grasp this paradox, we cannot merely look at a dry definition. We must delve into its core, examine the painful historical context that gave birth to it, and apply it to the complex challenges of the modern world. We must bravely face the question, where does the boundary of tolerance lie? And when does defending it become an unavoidable act, even if it comes at the cost of our own ideals? Part 1. The logical core. Tolerance's self-destructive loop. Imagine a small town, Ethelberg, built on the principle of absolute tolerance. All residents are free to express their views, practice their beliefs, and live as they wish as long as they cause no physical harm to others. The town prides itself on its diversity, its lively debates, and an open space where every voice is valued. But what happens when a voice, an ideology, begins to use that very tolerance as a weapon to destroy it? What happens when an open, free society is confronted by a force that declares it will not be tolerant of anyone else once it holds power? This is not a hypothetical question. This is the paradox of tolerance, one of the most haunting and profoundly influential philosophical ideas of the 20th century. Introduced by the philosopher Karl Popper in 1945, this paradox shook our core beliefs about freedom, fairness, and democracy. It forces us to confront a difficult truth. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance, and a society, to survive, must be willing to become intolerant of intolerance itself. To fully grasp this paradox, we cannot merely look at a dry definition. We must delve into its core, examine the painful historical context that gave birth to it, and apply it to the complex challenges of the modern world. We must bravely face the question, where does the boundary of tolerance lie? And when does defending it become an unavoidable act, even if it comes at the cost of our own ideals? Part 2. Historical context. A wake-up call from World War II. Karl Popper did not propose this paradox by chance. He wrote The Open Society and Its Enemies during Europe's darkest period, as fascism and totalitarianism raged. As an Austrian Jew, he witnessed firsthand the rise of an extremely intolerant ideology that used the democratic mechanisms of an open society to gradually seize power and ultimately destroy all freedom. The German people initially tolerated Hitler and the Nazi Party. They allowed hateful propaganda to spread. They believed that freedom of speech would be enough to counter it. But they were wrong. In his book, Popper analyzed how the ideas of Plato, Marx, and Hegel indirectly created a philosophical foundation for totalitarianism. He argued that these ideologies fostered a dangerous belief that there is only one truth, one perfect social order, and anyone who opposes it is an enemy. This is the root of intolerance. Popper saw that tolerance could not be a passive attitude, an unconditional acceptance. It had to be a proactive act, a steadfast defense. He had to flee Europe to escape the very people that society had tolerated. For him, the paradox was not just a logical puzzle, but a blood and tears-filled wake-up call. It was a brutal lesson for a generation that believed peace could be achieved by compromising with hatred. Intolerance, according to Popper, is not just a different political opinion. It is an opinion that directly attacks the very structure of dialogue and tolerance. It does not want to win a debate, it wants to destroy the debate. Therefore, a tolerant society cannot treat intolerance as an equal viewpoint, because doing so is to agree to a game whose ultimate rule is the strong get everything, the weak get nothing. Part 4. The Dilemma of the 4.0 Era. Social media and the marketplace of ideas. The world today, with the explosion of social media, has brought the paradox of tolerance back with a new, more complex face. We live in a global marketplace of ideas, where everyone has a megaphone to broadcast their voice, and those voices, at times, are calls for intolerance. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, now X, and YouTube face a difficult question. Should they allow hateful content, extreme conspiracy theories, or calls for violence to spread in the name of free speech? If they do, they become tools for the spread of intolerance. If they block them, they are criticized for censorship, for stifling voices, for betraying the principles of an open forum. This is a modern version of the paradox Popper warned about. One side believes the best way to combat bad ideas is with better ideas. They believe that only when all viewpoints are freely expressed can the truth prevail. They cite John Stuart Mill's words, "Truth in the great practical concerns of life is so much a question of the reconciling and combining of opposites that very few have been found capable of finding it." But the other side fears that in a world of algorithms and fake news, bad ideas are not naturally rejected. On the contrary, they are systematically amplified, targeting people's deepest fears and insecurities. Intolerance on social media is not just an opinion. It is a psychological attack designed to divide, sow doubt, and weaken faith in democratic institutions. Popper did not live to see social media, but he would likely not be surprised. He realized that tolerance cannot defend itself from those who have no intention of playing by its rules. Today, the question is no longer, should we be tolerant of intolerance, but rather, how do we protect tolerance in a space where intolerance can spread at the speed of light? Part 5. The Solutions and the Criticisms. Although Popper proposed a clear solution, its application in practice is incredibly complex. Some nations have tried to address this paradox by creating legal concepts like militant democracy, which allows the state to restrict political parties or ideological groups that openly oppose basic democratic principles. These nations learned a painful lesson from the past and believe that to protect democracy, one must sometimes accept limitations on freedom. However, the biggest criticism of Popper's solution is who gets to decide what is intolerant? The line between a strong, controversial viewpoint and one that genuinely threatens tolerance can be very blurry. A totalitarian government could exploit this principle to suppress dissidents, labeling them the intolerant to legitimize its actions. This concern is entirely valid, as history has shown that power is always prone to abuse. Another proposed solution is to focus on education and dialogue. Instead of suppressing, educate against intolerance. Create spaces for dialogue where people can learn to listen and understand each other. This method emphasizes the power of reason and empathy, believing that hatred often stems from ignorance and fear. However, this approach also has its weaknesses. Some intolerant ideologies are not products of ignorance, but are the result of a tightly constructed system of thought that rejects all dialogue and accepts only one truth. In such cases, trying to engage in dialogue with them is like trying to play chess with someone who refuses to follow the rules. Ultimately, the paradox of tolerance is not a question that can be solved with a single answer. It is a delicate balance between conflicting values. It forces us to live in a state of constant vigilance, where we must continually assess the risks and benefits of every action. Part 5. Tolerance is an act, not a passive state. In a chaotic and divided world, the paradox of tolerance reminds us of an undeniable truth. Tolerance is not a passive state, but an act. It is not a given, but a conscious choice and an unwavering defense. To maintain a tolerant society, we must do more than just accept differences. We must protect the principles that allow those differences to exist. We must bravely speak out when hatred is spread. We must refuse to become a tool for those who intend to destroy our very freedom. The final question of this paradox is not how do we escape it, but rather how will we confront it? It is an eternal challenge for every democracy, a reminder that the path to freedom is not a smooth one, but a path that requires vigilance, courage, and an unwavering commitment to humanity's most fundamental values. And perhaps its greatest lesson is, the strongest tolerance is not the tolerance that accepts all.
The crocodile paradox, a life-or-death logical trap. The edge of the river is a place of chilling tranquility. A father stands, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, the cool air doing little to soothe the sweat on his brow. Before him, half submerged in the murky water, is a crocodile. Not just any crocodile, but a creature of impossible intellect, its cold, unblinking eyes fixed upon him. In its jaw, it holds his child, a silent, terrified bundle of innocence. The crocodile, with a voice that is a low, gravelly rasp, presents a deal that is not a negotiation, but a logical trap of the most insidious kind. I will return your child, the creature states, if and only if you can correctly guess what I will do next. At that moment, the world freezes. The father's mind, a whirlwind of fear and parental instinct just seconds before, is abruptly stilled by a sudden, horrifying clarity. This is not a test of strength or courage. It is not an ordeal he can overcome with a physical act of will. This is a game of pure logic, a self-referential puzzle where every possible answer leads to an inescapable contradiction. This is the crocodile paradox, a thought experiment that has haunted philosophers and logicians for centuries. It's a tale of a predator, its prey, and the profound, terrifying moment when a simple promise becomes an impossible lie. The father's life, his child's life, and the very fabric of reason itself hang in the balance. He realizes with a sickening lurch in his stomach that his next words will not be a solution, but an entry point into a paradox that has no true exit. The paradox operates on the slippery ground of self-reference, where a statement's truth value is contingent on its own outcome. It's a brutal demonstration of how language, when bent just in the right way, can break the rules of reality. The father's desperate hope collides head-on with a logical wall, and the crocodile, the architect of this trap, waits patiently, its reptilian brain savoring the exquisite intellectual torment it has created. This isn't just a puzzle about a predator and its prey. It's profound exploration of knowledge, certainty, and the fundamental limits of promises made under duress. To the father, it is a living nightmare, but to the logician, it is a fascinating, if brutal, case study. What follows is not a choice between good and evil, but a choice between two logical dead ends, each one a path to certain tragedy. The father's mind, racing against the clock of his child's waning breath, attempts to deconstruct the problem. He knows he has only two possible responses, two roads, each with its own set of terrifying contingencies. He must choose his words carefully, for they will determine not only the fate of his child, but also the truth or falsity of the crocodile's promise. The first path is the path of hope, the second, the grim realism. He holds these two possible answers in his mind, turning them over and over like a pair of dice, each face a different terrifying outcome. He feels the weight of centuries of philosophical debate resting on his shoulders. In this moment, at the river's edge, with the cold, unblinking eyes of the crocodile as his only audience. This isn't just a puzzle. It is an existential moment, a testament to the fragile nature of certainty in a world where promises can be weaponized. Part 2. The trap deconstructed. The father's tortured logic. The father, a man of simple logic and honest work, now finds himself in a labyrinth of abstract reasoning. He takes a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs, and begins to dissect the crocodile's devious proposition. He knows he has to consider every angle, every possible consequence of his words. This isn't a game of chance, it's a game of if-then statements, and he must become a master of if-then statements in a matter of seconds. Scenario 1. The hopeful path. He imagines taking the first, most hopeful path. "You will return my child," he says aloud, his voice trembling slightly. Now, he must consider the two possible intentions of the crocodile. Subscenario A. The crocodile's true intention was to return the child all along. The father's guess is correct. According to the terms of the deal, if and only if you can correctly guess what I will do next, the crocodile is bound by its own promise. It returns the child. Logic holds. The father, in this case, would have been saved by a moment of either incredible insight or simple good fortune. His hopeful guess would have been validated by the crocodile's pre-existing intent. Subscenario B. The crocodile's true intention was to keep the child. The father's guess, "You will return my child," is incorrect. The condition for the deal is not met. The crocodile is not bound to return the child. It keeps the child. Logic also holds. In this bleak outcome, the father's hope was misplaced, and the paradox does not arise. The deal simply fails, and the tragedy, while immense, is not a logical contradiction. The father lets out a shaky breath. This path, though fraught with danger, seems straightforward. The outcome, whether joyful or tragic, is at least logically consistent. He feels a momentary glimmer of hope, a thought that maybe, just maybe, this is the way to win, but the crocodile's patient stare tells him otherwise. It's too easy. The paradox, he knows, lies in the other option. Scenario 2. The terrifying paradoxical path. Now the father must consider the second path, the one that his gut tells him is the true core of the trap. He must say the words that no parent would ever want to utter. "You will not return my child." Subscenario A. The first contradiction. The crocodile's true intention was to keep the child. The father's guess, "You will not return my child," is correct. Now, the core of the paradox is unleashed. The crocodile, bound by its promise, must now return the child because the father's guess was accurate. But this creates a devastating contradiction. The crocodile cannot simultaneously keep the child, its intent, and return the child, its promise. The logic of the situation collapses. The crocodile is trapped in a logical prison of its own making. Subscenario B. The second contradiction. The crocodile's true intention was to return the child. The father's guess, "You will not return my child," is incorrect. The condition for the deal is not met. The crocodile is not bound to return the child, But its original intent was to return the child anyway. The deal is broken, but not because of a contradiction in the father's statement, but in the crocodile's promise itself. The crocodile's promise, "I will return your child if and only if you correctly guess what I will do next," now falls apart. The "if and only if" clause is violated. In this case, the crocodile should not return the child because the father guessed wrong, but it planned to return the child. This creates a different kind of logical knot, one where the promise's own rules are violated by the outcome. The father's mind reels. He sees it now. No matter what the crocodile's intent, the second scenario forces a logical breakdown. He has found the trap, but understanding the trap does not help him escape it. He is a man in a cage, and he has just realized that the cage is made of an impossible paradox. The crocodile's promise, when confronted with the right question, becomes a meaningless string of words, a self-referential lie that collapses under its own weight. The father's only hope, his only chance for a logical outcome, lies in saying the words he hopes are true. But even then, he knows the monster's intent might be to keep his child all along, and the paradox would remain dormant, a potentiality unfulfilled. But the tragedy would be just as real. Part 3. The philosophical roots. Ancestors of the crocodile. The father's agonizing logical struggle is not a new problem in the history of human thought. The crocodile paradox is merely the most emotionally charged and viscerally brutal iteration of a family of puzzles that have tormented philosophers and logicians for centuries. At its heart, it is a self-referential paradox where a statement, a rule, or a promise refers to itself in a way that creates a loop of impossible contradictions. To truly grasp the significance of the crocodile's devious game, we must look to its ancestors, the ancient riddles that first exposed the fragility of language and reason. The most famous of these is the liar's paradox. Attributed to the ancient Greek philosopher Eubulides, the paradox is a single, chilling statement. This statement is false. The logic is maddeningly simple. If the statement, "this statement is false," is true, then it must be false, as it claims. But if it is false, then its claim that it is false must be a lie, which means the statement must be true. It's a closed loop, a never-ending cycle of truth and falsity that proves a single, terrifying point. Not every grammatically correct sentence can be assigned a truth value. The liar's paradox showed that language, our primary tool for making sense of the world, contain inherent flaws, blind spots, and contradictions. Another close relative is Russell's paradox, which deals with the fundamentals of set theory. In a playful, more digestible version, Russell proposed the barber paradox. A barber shaves all and only those men in the village who do not shave themselves. The question is, who shaves the barber? If he shaves himself, he violates the rule because he is only supposed to shave those who do not shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, he must, by the rules of the village, shave himself. Like the crocodile's promise, the barber's rule creates a logical contradiction that makes the barber's existence impossible within the framework of the rule itself. This paradox, though seemingly lighthearted, had profound implications, forcing mathematicians to redefine the very foundations of set theory. The crocodile paradox, with its high-stakes emotional core, brings these abstract logical puzzles into the brutal, messy world of human relationships and survival. It's a vivid demonstration of how these philosophical loopholes aren't just academic curiosities. They can reflect real-world scenarios where agreements are made under flawed premises, and the rules are designed to be broken. Think of legal contracts with self-contradictory clauses, or political promises that are so sweeping that they become a logical trap for themselves and their constituents. The moment they are called to account, the promise collapses under its own weight, leaving the powerful to claim they were simply misunderstood, while the powerless suffer the consequence.
The unexpected hanging paradox is a logical labyrinth of surprise and certainty. A prisoner is sentenced to death by hanging. The judge, with a flair for theatrical cruelty, announces the sentence with a peculiar twist. You will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week. But it will be a surprise. You will not know the day of your execution until the executioner arrives. The prisoner, a man with a sharp mind and a fierce will to live, is not disheartened. He begins to analyze the judge's statement with a chilling precision, using logic as his only weapon. He reasons that the hanging cannot possibly take place. He believes he has found a logical flaw in the judge's promise, a self-contradiction that will set him free. His reasoning goes like this. The hanging cannot be on Friday. Why? Because if I am still alive by Thursday evening, I will know that Friday is the only possible day left for the execution. The judge's promise that it will be a surprise would be broken. Therefore, Friday is ruled out. With Friday eliminated, he continues his flawless seeming logic. The hanging cannot be on Thursday either. Why? Because if I am still alive by Wednesday evening and I know that Friday is out, then Thursday becomes the last remaining day. The surprise would be gone, so Thursday is also ruled out. He continues this process, systematically eliminating Wednesday, then Tuesday, and finally Monday. He concludes that the judge's statement is impossible to fulfill. He goes to sleep on Sunday night, confident in his victory. But on Wednesday, at noon, the executioner arrives, and the prisoner is hanged completely by surprise. This is the core of the unexpected hanging paradox, a thought experiment that has baffled philosophers, logicians, and mathematicians for decades. It's a classic paradox that plays with our understanding of logic, knowledge, and self-fulfilling reasoning. The paradox is not a simple trick of words. It's a profound puzzle that reveals a fundamental flaw in the prisoner's deductive reasoning and in our own assumptions about what is knowable in the face of uncertainty. This essay will delve into the origins of this paradox, explore its logical deconstruction, and examine its deeper implications for the nature of prediction, surprise, and the limits of human reason. The paradox is more than just a clever riddle, it's a powerful tool for understanding the fine line between what we think we know and what we truly know. The paradox forces us to confront a contradiction between two seemingly true statements, the prisoner's logical deduction and the reality of his execution. We intuitively feel that the prisoner's reasoning is sound. His logic, step by step, seems to lead to an inescapable conclusion. But the outcome, his surprise hanging on Wednesday, proves his reasoning was fundamentally flawed. The paradox is the tension between these two realities. It is a moment where our reason and our experience collide and leave us with a question that, on the surface, seems unanswerable. This essay will argue that the key to resolving the paradox lies not in finding an error in the prisoner's logic, but in questioning the very foundation of his assumption that his logical deduction can be applied to a situation involving an element of surprise. Part 2. The flaw in the prisoner's logic. The prisoner's reasoning seems watertight, but it contains a subtle yet fatal flaw. The paradox is a clever trap, and the prisoner, in his brilliant logical deduction, walked right into it. The flaw lies in his assumption that his deductions would hold true in the face of a statement that contains a self-referential element of surprise. His logic, while internally consistent, fails to account for the very nature of the surprise that the judge promised. His first step, the hanging cannot be on Friday, is the point of collapse. This deduction is only true if he is still alive by Thursday evening and knows that Friday is the only possible day left for the execution. The judge's promise that it will be a surprise would be broken. Therefore, Friday is ruled out. With Friday eliminated, he continues his flawless seeming logic. The hanging cannot be on Thursday either. Why? Because if I am still alive by Wednesday evening and I know that Friday is out, then Thursday becomes the last remaining day. The surprise would be gone, so Thursday is also ruled out. He continues this process, systematically eliminating Wednesday, then Tuesday, and finally Monday. He concludes that the judge's statement is impossible to fulfill. He goes to sleep on Sunday night, confident in his victory. But on Wednesday, at noon, the executioner arrives and the prisoner is hanged completely by surprise. The paradox reveals that the prisoner's logical reasoning is a prediction, and this prediction is part of the system itself. By concluding that the hanging cannot happen on Friday, the prisoner is essentially saying, I will know for certain that the hanging is on Friday if I am still alive by Thursday evening. This very certainty is what he believes makes the promise of a surprise impossible. But his certainty is based on a prediction that is itself a part of the game. He has created a closed logical loop, a self-referential trap from which there is no escape.
The judge's promise, in a sense, is not a statement of fact, but a logical operator that works to invalidate the prisoner's predictions. The prisoner's mistake is in assuming that his knowledge is absolute. He thinks he knows that the hanging cannot be on Friday, but he doesn't. He only knows that if the hanging were to be on Friday, it would not be a surprise. But he can't possibly know that it won't be on Friday until Friday arrives and he isn't hanged. This subtle distinction between a logical possibility and a known fact is the core of the paradox. The judge's statement, "You will be surprised," is not a prediction. It's a promise that works to invalidate the prisoner's own predictive logic. When the executioner arrives on Wednesday, the prisoner is surprised precisely because his reasoning, which had proved that Wednesday was impossible, was wrong. The paradox is resolved by showing that the prisoner's reasoning was a flawed prediction, a self-referential trap that was broken by the reality of his surprise. Part 3. The philosophical and psychological dimensions. Beyond its logical puzzle, the unexpected hanging paradox has profound philosophical and psychological implications. It forces us to reconsider the nature of knowledge, certainty, and the limits of human reasoning when applied to situations involving surprise and uncertainty. The paradox is a powerful argument for the idea that some aspects of reality are fundamentally unpredictable, and that our logical systems, while powerful, are not always equipped to handle them. The paradox is a form of epistemological dilemma, a problem related to the nature of knowledge. It shows us that our knowledge of an event can be fundamentally altered by our ability to predict it. The prisoner's knowledge of the hanging's impossibility is what, paradoxically, makes the hanging possible and surprising. The paradox shows us that, in some cases, the very act of knowing something can prevent it from being true. This is a radical departure from our everyday understanding of how knowledge works. We are taught that knowledge is a tool for prediction, a way of making sense of the world. But the paradox shows us that in some cases, knowledge can be a self-defeating trap, a labyrinth of our own making. The paradox also has a deep connection to game theory, the study of strategic decision-making. In game theory, players often try to predict their opponent's moves, but the unexpected hanging paradox shows how this can backfire. The prisoner, in his attempt to outsmart the judge, made a prediction that ultimately ensured his own surprise. His overthinking, his attempt to find a logical escape, was what trapped him. The paradox is a reminder that in a game of strategy, sometimes the best move is not to play at all, or to accept that some outcomes are simply unknowable. It shows us that the power of a strategic game is not just in the moves that are made, but in the rules that are set, and that the rules can be designed in a way that makes winning impossible. On a personal level, the paradox is a chilling exploration of the psychology of surprise. We are surprised when an event occurs that we did not expect. The prisoner, in his mind, had eliminated Wednesday as a possibility. He had convinced himself that the judge's promise was a lie. When the executioner arrives, his surprise was genuine and complete. The paradox shows us that a surprise is not just a lack of knowledge, it is a direct contradiction of what we thought we knew. The shock of the unexpected is not just a fleeting emotion, it is a fundamental disruption of our internal logical framework. The paradox is a testament to the power of the unexpected, a reminder that the most profound moments in our lives are often the ones we could never have predicted. Part 4. The Paradox and its Legacy. The unexpected hanging paradox, while a dark and morbid thought experiment, has had a lasting legacy in philosophy, logic, and computer science. It has served as a powerful tool for exploring the limits of formal systems and the inherent challenges of self-reference. It has been used to illuminate the challenges of creating an infallible logical system and has been a source of fascination for generations of thinkers. In the realm of logic, the paradox is a reminder that a premise that seems simple and straightforward can contain a deep and fatal flaw. The statement, "You will be surprised," is not just a piece of a sentence. It is a logical operator that works to invalidate any attempt at a certain prediction. The paradox shows us that some statements, when applied to a system, can make that system inherently inconsistent. It is a powerful argument for the idea that not all language can be put into a neat logical box. Some words, when used in a self-referential way, can create a logical contradiction that has no clear resolution. In computer science, the paradox has been used to explore the limits of computability.
The Fermi paradox. Where is everybody? Look up at the night sky. On a clear evening, far from the city lights, you can see a breathtaking canopy of stars. Each one is a sun, and billions of them reside in our own galaxy, the Milky Way. Our galaxy is just one of hundreds of billions of galaxies in the observable universe. This vastness is almost incomprehensible. Given the sheer number of stars and planets, many of which are likely to be in the habitable zone where liquid water can exist, it seems almost certain that intelligent life must have evolved elsewhere. And yet, despite decades of searching, we have found nothing. No signals, no spaceships, no trace of advanced civilizations. This puzzling contradiction is the Fermi paradox. It's a profound question that challenges our place in the universe and forces us to confront the possibility that either we are a cosmic fluke or something is fundamentally wrong with our assumptions about the origins and longevity of intelligent life. The paradox gets its name from the physicist Enrico Fermi, who, during a lunchtime conversation in 1950, casually asked, "Where is everybody?" This simple question opened a Pandora's box of existential dread and scientific inquiry that has haunted astronomers, physicists, and philosophers ever since. The math seems to demand that life should be out there, and yet the universe is eerily silent. This essay will explore the origins of the Fermi paradox, examine the most compelling proposed solutions, and reflect on what this great silence might mean for humanity's future. The paradox is more than just a scientific mystery. It is a profound philosophical challenge, a mirror reflecting our own hopes and fears about our place in the cosmos. The paradox is rooted in the Drake equation, a probabilistic argument used to estimate the number of active, communicative extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way. The equation, while speculative, highlights the astronomical odds of life existing elsewhere. It considers factors such as the rate of star formation, the fraction of stars with planets, the number of habitable planets per star, and the fraction of planets where life emerges. Even if we use the most conservative estimates, the number of civilizations should be in the millions. These civilizations would have had billions of years to evolve and spread across the galaxy. Given this, it seems illogical that our corner of the universe would be devoid of any signs of life. The paradox is the terrifying silence that exists in the face of this overwhelming probability. It's a paradox of scale, a moment where our reason and our experience collide, leaving us with a terrifying, unanswerable question. The great silence is a mystery, and what it conceals could be even more terrifying. Part 2. The filters. Solving the paradox with a great wall. One of the most compelling and unsettling approaches to solving the Fermi paradox is the great filter theory. This idea, first proposed by Robin Hanson, suggests that there is a filter, a barrier or evolutionary step that is incredibly difficult for life to overcome that prevents civilizations from reaching the point where they can colonize the galaxy. The filter could be a single, monumental hurdle or a series of smaller hurdles, and it could lie either in our past or in our future. The placement of the filter is what makes this theory so fascinating and so terrifying. The early filter. One possibility is that the great filter is behind us. This would mean that the leap from simple, single-celled organisms to complex, intelligent life is so improbable that it has only happened once in the history of the universe, on Earth. This would make us a cosmic fluke, a 1 in a billion anomaly. While this is a humbling and ego-crushing thought, it is also, in a strange way, comforting. If the filter is behind us, it means we have already overcome the greatest obstacle. It means that the path to a galactic civilization is, for us, relatively clear. It means that the universe is silent because we are the first or one of the first to make it this far. In this scenario, we would be the rarest and most precious form of life in the cosmos, a lonely but triumphant beacon in the dark. The silence of the universe in this view is a sign of our unique success.
The second, and far more terrifying possibility, is that the Great Filter lies ahead of us. This would mean that life is relatively common throughout the universe, but there is a hurdle, a technological, environmental, or existential barrier that no civilization has yet been able to overcome. The universe is silent not because life is rare, but because all life, once it reaches a certain level of technological advancement, is destroyed. This could be anything from self-annihilation through nuclear war to an ecological collapse caused by unchecked industrialization or the creation of an artificial intelligence that turns against its creators. In this scenario, the silence of the universe is a warning. It is the echo of countless civilizations that reached for the stars only to be wiped out by their own creations or their own folly. The fact that we have not yet made contact with anyone would mean that we are not the first, but simply the next to face this inevitable fate. The silence, in this view, is a sign of our impending doom. The Great Filter theory is a profound way of looking at the paradox. It transforms the question, where is everybody, into a more personal and urgent question, where are we on the timeline of the Great Filter? The fact that we have not yet seen any signs of life, in this view, is not a cause for celebration but a cause for fear. It means that the most likely reason for the silence is a catastrophe that we are all headed towards. This theory forces us to confront our own fragility and our own potential for self-destruction. The paradox is no longer a riddle about aliens. It is a mirror reflecting our own deepest flaws and a warning about the fragility of our own existence. Part 3. The silence of a cosmic zoo. Another popular and less bleak solution to the Fermi paradox is the zoo hypothesis. This theory suggests that extraterrestrial civilizations are out there, but they are deliberately avoiding contact with us. We are in a sense in a cosmic zoo, a protected wilderness area where our development is being observed, but not interfered with. Advanced civilizations, having learned from their own history, may have adopted a non-interference policy, a kind of galactic prime directive, to allow emerging species like ours to evolve naturally, without the shock of contact. The logic is that our civilization, still in its infancy, would not be able to handle the cultural, technological, or social shock of contact with a far more advanced species. The silence in this view is not a sign of loneliness, but a sign of our protected status. It is an act of galactic diplomacy, a kindness from a more advanced civilization. This theory has several variations. In one version, the zoo is a galactic quarantine. Advanced civilizations have seen the danger that other species, especially aggressive ones, pose to the galaxy, and they have decided to quarantine us until we have matured enough to no longer be a threat to ourselves or others. The silence in this view is a form of punishment, a timeout for a species that is still learning how to get along. In another version, the zoo is a more benign form of observation, a kind of sociological experiment where our every move is being watched and recorded for scientific study. The silence in this view is not a sign of loneliness, but a sign of our scientific fascination. The zoo hypothesis, while comforting to some, is not without its flaws. The biggest flaw is the assumption of a unified galactic civilization. It would only take one rogue civilization to break the rules, to make contact, or to interfere with us. The fact that no one has done so, in this view, is a sign of a level of galactic cooperation and unity that seems, given our own history, highly improbable. The paradox in this case forces us to make a choice between our own assumptions about human nature and the assumed nature of an advanced galactic civilization. Are they more unified than we are? Or is the silence simply a sign of a deeper, more fundamental truth? The zoo hypothesis, while comforting to some, still relies on a series of assumptions that may not hold true. It is a solution that comforts our fears, but does not necessarily answer our questions. The silence in this view is a mystery, and what it conceals could be an advanced form of cooperation or simply an elegant explanation for a profound and still terrifying lack of contact. Part 4. The finality of extinction and the great silence. Another set of solutions to the Fermi paradox is a more grim, a more final one. They don't rely on filters or zoos, but on the simple, brutal truth of physics and biology. These solutions suggest that the universe is silent because advanced civilizations, one by one, have gone extinct. The silence is not a sign of a great filter, but a sign of a great tragedy. There are several versions of this extinction hypothesis, each one more chilling than the last. One version suggests that civilizations simply have a short lifespan. They may reach a certain level of technological advancement, but then they are wiped out by their own creations. This could be anything from a runaway ecological collapse to an unforeseen technological catastrophe. The paradox in this view is a reflection of a brutal reality. The path to becoming a galactic civilization is not just a technological one, but an ethical and moral one, and most species fail this test. The silence is not a sign of a great barrier, but a sign of a...
The Barber Paradox, the puzzling riddle that shook the foundations of logic. Imagine a small, quiet village nestled in the rolling hills of Europe. This village has only one barber, a meticulous craftsman who takes great pride in his work. The village has a single ironclad rule governing his services, a rule so simple and absolute that it seems to defy all possibility of contradiction. The rule states, the barber shaves all and only those men in the village who do not shave themselves. This sounds straightforward enough. The men of the village are divided into two distinct groups, those who shave themselves and those who go to the barber for a shave. The barber's job is clear. He must shave every man in the second group, and he must not touch a single man from the first. But then a simple yet devastating question arises, a question that unravels the entire logical foundation of the village's rule. Who shaves the barber? This is the heart of the Barber Paradox, a thought experiment that has haunted philosophers and logicians for over a century. It's a riddle that, upon first hearing, sounds like a simple brain teaser. But as you attempt to solve it, you find yourself trapped in a never-ending cycle of contradiction. If the barber shaves himself, he violates the rule. But if he doesn't shave himself, he also violates the rule. There is no logical path forward. This essay will explore the origins of this paradox, its devastating link to the very foundations of mathematics, and what this seemingly playful riddle tells us about the limits of language, logic, and self-reference. The Barber Paradox is not just a clever puzzle, it's a profound demonstration of how a seemingly simple rule can collapse under the weight of its own internal contradictions. The paradox forces us to confront a fundamental assumption we make about our language and our logic, that we can always create a clear, consistent set of rules to describe a situation. The barber's rule seems to do just that, creating two neat, mutually exclusive categories for the men of the village. But the moment we try to place the barber himself into one of these categories, the entire system breaks down. The paradox is a powerful and chilling reminder that some of our most basic logical constructs contain hidden flaws, and that even the most meticulous of rules can be undone by the simple act of self-reference. The story of the barber is a microcosm of a much larger, more universal problem. It is a testament to the idea that some of our most cherished certainties are, in fact, built on a foundation of impossible contradictions. Part 2. The logical breakdown of an impossible job. The Barber Paradox, in its elegant simplicity, is a masterclass in how to build an unbreakable logical trap. The contradiction arises from the single crucial condition that defines the barber's role. The rule states, the barber shaves all and only those men in the village who do not shave themselves. The phrase all and only those is the logical operator that makes the paradox inescapable. It means two things must be true simultaneously. He shaves every man who does not shave himself. He does not shave any man who shaves himself. Now let's attempt to apply this rule to the barber himself. He must fall into one of the two groups of men in the village. Scenario 1. The barber shaves himself. Let's assume for the sake of argument that the barber shaves himself. This places him in the first category. men who shave themselves. But the rule explicitly states that the barber is only supposed to shave men who do not shave themselves. By shaving himself, he has violated the rule. The logic is now in direct conflict with the premise. He cannot, under the terms of the rule, be in the group of men who shave themselves because the rule forbids him from shaving them. The scenario collapses. Scenario 2. The barber does not shave himself. Now let's assume the opposite. The barber does not shave himself. This places him in the second category, men who do not shave themselves. But the rule also states that the barber must shave every man who falls into this category. By not shaving himself, he is now required, by the very rules of the village, to shave himself. This again creates a devastating contradiction. He must shave himself because he doesn't, which is a logical absurdity. The scenario collapses a second time. No matter which path we take, the result is the same. The rule cannot be applied to the barber without creating an impossible contradiction. The paradox is a self-referential loop where the barber's existence, defined by the rule, is made impossible by the rule itself. The logical system, in this case, is broken. The barber cannot exist within the framework of the rules that define his existence. His job is, quite literally, an impossible one. The genius of this paradox is how it demonstrates that not every seemingly coherent set of statements is logically sound. The language of the rule is perfectly fine. The words are clear. But the moment the rule is applied to itself, a catastrophic logical failure occurs. This is the heart of the paradox. It shows us that our intuitive understanding of rules and categories can be profoundly wrong, and that even the most simple logical systems contain hidden flaws that, when triggered, can lead to a state of total contradiction. The barber's fate is a philosophical testament to the idea that some things simply cannot be. Part 3. From Barbers to Sets, the Devastating Legacy of Russell's Paradox. The barber paradox may seem like a light-hearted brain teaser, but it was in fact a simple and elegant way for one of the greatest minds of the 20th century to expose a fatal flaw in the very foundations of mathematics. The barber is a metaphor for a much larger, more serious problem known as Russell's paradox, which shook the world of logic and mathematics to its core. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, mathematicians were attempting to build a rigorous, contradiction-free foundation for all of mathematics based on a new field called set theory. Set theory deals with collections of objects known as sets. For example, you can have a set of all prime numbers, or a set of all chairs. Most sets do not contain themselves. The set of all chairs, for example, is a set, not a chair. But a set can contain itself. Imagine a set of all sets. That set would, by its definition, contain itself. The idea seemed harmless enough. But then the British mathematician and philosopher Bertrand Russell in 1901 presented a new, terrifying paradox. He asked us to consider the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. This seemingly simple concept led to a devastating logical collapse. Does this set contain itself? If this set contains itself, then by its own definition it shouldn't, because it is supposed to contain only sets that do not contain themselves. If this set does not contain itself, then by its own definition it must contain itself, because it is supposed to contain all sets that do not contain themselves. This was Russell's paradox. It was the mathematical equivalent of the barber paradox, and it was a direct attack on the very foundations of set theory. It showed that the rules of early set theory were inconsistent and that it was possible to create a logical statement that led to a contradiction. The paradox proved that the initial attempt to build a perfectly consistent foundation for mathematics was flawed. It was a crisis of confidence for an entire generation of mathematicians who believed they were on the verge of creating a perfect, logical system for the universe. The legacy of Russell's paradox was immense.
It forced a fundamental reevaluation of set theory and led to the development of new, more sophisticated systems of logic and mathematics that contained safeguards to prevent such self-referential paradoxes. The barber, in this sense, is not just a character in a riddle, he is a symbol of a deep intellectual revolution. He's a testament to the idea that some of the most profound truths in our world are discovered not by finding an answer, but by finding a problem. The paradox, far from being an obstacle, was a catalyst for a more robust and rigorous way of thinking. It showed us that even our most cherished and fundamental truths must be constantly tested and refined. The story of the barber is a timeless symbol of this intellectual journey, a guide for all of us who seek to understand the rules of the universe and the hidden contradictions that lie within. Part 4, Beyond the Riddle, Where the Paradox Manifests in Life. The barber paradox and its logical sibling, Russell's paradox, are not confined to the abstract worlds of philosophy and mathematics. The principles of self-reference and logical contradiction they expose are a constant presence in our real-world systems, from computer science to law and even to our own social norms. The paradox is a powerful tool for identifying the hidden flaws and potential points of failure in the systems we create. In computer science, the paradox is a warning about the dangers of self-referential code. A computer program that attempts to define or modify itself can lead to a logical contradiction, resulting in a program that crashes or enters an infinite loop. The famous halting problem, which asks whether it's possible to write a program that can determine if any other given program will ever finish running, is a form of self-referential paradox. It proves that such a program cannot exist because if it did, it would create a contradiction. The paradox in this context is not a philosophical puzzle, but
the paradox of thrift, a deep dive into saving, spending, and economic contradiction. Imagine a family, the Millers, sitting around their dinner table. The news is grim. The economy is slowing down, jobs feel less secure, and the future is uncertain. In a moment of collective wisdom, the father, a practical man, proposes a plan. We need to save more, he says. We should cut back on non-essential spending, no more eating out, no new clothes, no expensive vacations. We need to build a nest egg for a rainy day. The family agrees. It's a sensible, responsible, and prudent decision. In fact, 1,000 other families across the country are having the same conversation. They all decide to do the same thing: save more and spend less. On an individual level, this is a beautiful and rational act. It is the cornerstone of personal finance. We are taught from a young age that saving is a virtue, a path to security and future prosperity. But what happens when the entire nation, guided by this same sound logic, decides to save more at the same time? This is the core of the paradox of thrift, a counterintuitive economic principle that flips our understanding of personal finance on its head. It suggests that while saving is good for an individual, a collective increase in saving can be detrimental to the economy as a whole. This is not just a quirky economic theory. It is a profound lesson about the interconnectedness of our financial lives and the dangerous ripple effects of our collective actions. This essay will explore the origins of this paradox, its mechanisms, its real-world implications, and its enduring relevance in today's global economy. For a long time, the prevailing economic wisdom was that saving was always a good thing. In classical economics, it was believed that money saved would be immediately reinvested, fueling business expansion, innovation, and long-term growth. The act of saving was seen as a direct path to a more productive future. But this view fundamentally ignored the role of consumer demand. It wasn't until the Great Depression of the 1930s that a new way of thinking, championed by the British economist John Maynard Keynes, exposed the fatal flaw in this logic.
The Great Depression was a period of unprecedented economic hardship, marked by a widespread collapse in consumer confidence. People, fearful for their jobs and their future, did exactly what the Millers did. They saved more and spent less. And instead of leading to a boom in investment, it led to an even deeper, more devastating economic spiral. Part 2. The Keynesian Revelation. Saving as a symptom, not a cure. John Maynard Keynes, witnessing the economic devastation of the Great Depression, realized that the classical economic model was incomplete. He saw that in a time of crisis, a collective increase in saving was not a sign of future prosperity. It was a symptom of a much deeper problem, a collapse in aggregate demand. Let's return to the Millers. When they stopped eating out, the local restaurant saw a dip in their daily revenue. When they didn't buy new clothes, the retail store's sales went down. When thousands of families across the country followed suit, these small dips became massive declines. The local restaurant, with fewer customers, had to cut back on staff. The retail store, with a surplus of inventory, laid off its employees. The local grocer, seeing fewer people shopping, began to struggle. The cycle feeds on itself. As businesses cut jobs and lay off workers, more people find themselves without an income. These newly unemployed people, in turn, have to cut back on their own spending, which further reduces demand for goods and services. The Millers' neighbors, who were once secure in their jobs, now have to save more out of necessity, further exacerbating the problem. The economy spirals downward not because of a lack of productive capacity, but because of a lack of demand. The very act of saving, which was meant to protect people from a financial crisis, becomes the force that deepens the crisis for everyone. Keynes argued that in this situation, the economy is trapped in a paradoxical state. The decision that is rational for one person, to save money for a rainy day, becomes irrational for the group when everyone does it at once. The rainy day they were all saving for is created by their collective decision to save. The paradox is a classic example of what economists call the fallacy of composition, where what is true for the part is not necessarily true for the whole. While it makes perfect sense for an individual to put money away, the economy as a whole requires a certain level of spending to keep the wheels of commerce turning. The key insight of Keynesian economics was that in a recession, a lack of saving is not the problem. A lack of spending is. The solution, he argued, was not to encourage more saving, but to stimulate demand. This could be done through various means, most notably through government spending. By having the government inject money into the economy through public works projects, infrastructure development, or increased social programs, it could create jobs, put money back into people's pockets, and kickstart the cycle of spending and consumption. This idea was revolutionary and formed the basis of modern macroeconomic policy, shaping how governments respond to recessions to this day. The paradox of thrift, therefore, is not a condemnation of saving as a practice. It is a cautionary tale about timing and context. In a healthy economy, saving is a vital force for growth. It becomes the capital that banks lend to businesses, funding new factories, technologies, and innovations. But in a contracting economy, a collective surge in saving can exacerbate a downturn, proving that the same action can have wildly different consequences depending on the economic environment. Part 3. Real-world manifestations, from the Great Depression to today. The paradox of thrift is not just a theoretical concept confined to the pages of economic textbooks. Its effects have been felt throughout history, shaping our responses to economic crises and revealing the complex psychological underpinnings of our financial behavior. From the Great Depression to the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, the paradox has played out on a global scale, with real-world consequences for millions of people.
The most famous historical example is, of course, the Great Depression. As the stock market crashed and unemployment soared, a wave of fear swept across the nation. People, seeing their neighbors lose their jobs and their life savings, did the only thing they thought they could. They held on to their money. Consumer spending plummeted, businesses already struggling were forced to close, and the unemployment rate skyrocketed to over 20%. What began as a rational individual response to a crisis became the very mechanism that turned a severe recession into a generational economic catastrophe. The paradox was not a theory, it was a devastating reality. Fast forward to the 2008 financial crisis. As the housing market collapsed and banks faced a liquidity crisis, fear again gripped the public. Consumers, burdened with debt and worried about job security, cut back on spending. This time, however, governments and central banks, armed with the lessons of Keynesian economics, intervened aggressively. They lowered interest rates, bailed out banks, and in some cases passed fiscal stimulus packages. While the crisis was still severe, these actions helped to prevent a full-blown depression. They were a direct application of the paradox of thrift's central lesson. When private demand collapses, public spending must step in to fill the void. More recently, the COVID-19 pandemic presented another fascinating and, in some ways, unique application of the paradox. In the early days of the pandemic, with lockdowns and business closures, consumer spending plummeted. People facing an uncertain future hunkered down, saved money, and paid down debt. This was a rational response to an unprecedented health crisis. However, governments around the world, understanding the risk of a demand-driven recession, responded with massive stimulus measures. Unemployment benefits, direct payments to citizens, and small business loans were all designed to keep money flowing through the economy. The paradox of thrift was at the forefront of policymakers' minds. They knew that without these interventions, the collective urge to save would have triggered a far worse economic contraction. These examples show that the paradox is a constant force in economic history. It highlights the fine line between prudent behavior and a self-fulfilling prophecy of economic doom. It reminds us that our collective financial decisions are not just personal choices. They are powerful levers that can either lift the economy up or send it spiraling down. The paradox is a mirror, reflecting our fears and anxieties back at us in the form of economic instability. It is a testament to the fact that economics is not just about numbers and models. It is fundamentally about human behavior, confidence, and the psychology of fear. Part 5. The psychological dimension and the role of confidence. The paradox of thrift has a profound...
The ship of Theseus paradox, the enduring question of identity. Imagine a ship, the very one that the mythical hero Theseus sailed home in after his great victory. As a symbol of Athenian pride, it is preserved in the harbor for centuries. Over time, its wooden planks begin to rot, its sails fray, and its mast weakens. To keep it seaworthy, the Athenians meticulously replace each decaying part with a new, identical one. A rotten plank is swapped for a fresh one. A frayed sail is replaced with a new canvas. A worn-out rudder is exchanged for a new one. This process continues for generations until, one day, not a single original part of Theseus's ship remains. The ship still looks and functions exactly as it did, but the question arises, is it still the same ship? This is the core of the ship of Theseus paradox, one of the most famous and perplexing thought experiments in Western philosophy. It challenges our most fundamental assumptions about identity, continuity, and the nature of objects. The paradox, however, doesn't stop there. The philosopher Thomas Hobbes added a second, even more mind-bending layer to the problem. What if someone, seeing the pile of original, discarded parts, decides to meticulously reassemble them into a new ship? Now we have two ships, the one that has been continuously maintained and the one built from the original parts. Which one, if either, is the true ship of Theseus? The paradox in its full form leaves us tangled in a profound dilemma with no easy answer. It is a puzzle that forces us to question what makes something what it is. Is it its physical components, its form and function, or something more abstract, like its history and name? The paradox, while simple in its premise, has been a source of intellectual fascination for over 2,000 years, first posed by ancient Greeks like Plutarch. It is a cornerstone of metaphysics, the branch of philosophy that deals with the nature of reality. It's not just a debate about a ship, it's a debate about everything that changes over time, including ourselves. It is a mirror reflecting our own struggle to define identity in a world of constant flux. The paradox suggests that our intuitive sense of identity, that something is either the same or it is not, is too simplistic for a reality that is far more nuanced. This essay will delve into the various philosophical approaches to solving the paradox, from those that prioritize physical continuity to those that value historical or functional continuity. We will see that the paradox is not an error to be corrected, but a powerful guide for thinking more deeply about the nature of being and becoming. The enduring power of the ship of Theseus lies in its ability to expose the limitations of our language and our reasoning. Our words, such as same, identity, and ship, work perfectly well in everyday conversation. But when pushed to their logical extreme, as the paradox does, their meanings begin to break down. The paradox is an invitation to explore the gray area between being and not being, between what has been and what is to come. It challenges us to move beyond simple categories and to embrace the beautiful, confusing, and ultimately profound truth that identity is not a static state, but a dynamic, ever-changing process. Part 2. The 3 philosophical arguments for identity. Philosophers have grappled with the ship of Theseus paradox for centuries, and their attempts to resolve it have fallen into 3 main categories. Each of these arguments offers a different perspective on what truly constitutes an object's identity, and each, in its own way, provides a compelling yet ultimately incomplete solution. The first argument, known as physical continuity, holds that an object's identity is tied to its material components. From this perspective, the ship of Theseus is the one that was rebuilt from the original discarded parts. The ship that has been continuously repaired is a mere replica, a new ship that has taken the old one's place. The identity of the original ship, in this view, is preserved in the physical substance of its planks and sails. This argument is intuitively strong for many people. After all, if you replace every single cell in your body, are you still the same person? The physical continuity argument would suggest that in a purely material sense, you are not. However, this argument has a significant flaw. It would mean that any object that undergoes a change in its physical components, a car that has a tire replaced, a house that has a roof repaired, ceases to be the same object. This seems to violate our common sense understanding of identity. We would still call a car with new tires the same car because its identity is not solely tied to its physical parts. The physical continuity argument, while logically clean, struggles to account for the reality of change. The second argument, functional continuity, argues that an object's identity is tied to its form, function, and history. From this perspective, the ship of Theseus is the one that has been sailing continuously for centuries. It still carries the name the ship of Theseus, it still serves its function as a ship, and it has a continuous historical record. The ship rebuilt from the old parts, on the other hand, is a new ship. It may be made of the original parts, but its form was broken and its history was interrupted. This argument resonates with our everyday experience. We would still consider an old family recipe to be the same recipe, even if we use new ingredients each time we cook it. Its identity is tied to its form and its history, not its material components. However, this argument also has a weakness.
It suggests that if a ship were to be completely dismantled, stored in a warehouse for 100 years, and then rebuilt with all of its original parts, it would not be the same ship because its historical and functional continuity was broken. This seems equally counterintuitive. The functional continuity argument, while powerful, struggles to account for the importance of an object's physical origins. The third argument, temporal continuity, attempts to find a middle ground by arguing that identity is a continuous process. This view suggests that as long as the changes to an object are gradual and incremental, its identity is preserved. The ship that has been continuously repaired remains the ship of Theseus because there was never a single moment where it ceased to be itself. The identity of the ship in this view is a continuous thread that connects its past to its present, and as long as that thread is not broken, the identity remains. The ship rebuilt from the old parts, on the other hand, is not the original ship because its identity was not a continuous process. It was broken and then reassembled. This argument feels the most satisfying because it aligns with our intuitive understanding of how things change over time. But it also raises the question, at what point is a thread considered broken? If half of the ship's planks were replaced all at once, would that be a break in continuity? The temporal continuity argument, while a powerful way to think about identity, still struggles to define the precise threshold where continuity is lost. Ultimately, the failure of these three solutions to fully resolve the paradox is what makes it so enduring. The ship of Theseus is not a problem to be solved, it is a question to be explored. It shows us that there is no single absolute truth about identity. Rather, identity is a complex concept that depends on which set of values, physical, functional, or temporal, we choose to prioritize. Part 3. From a ship to ourselves and everything else. The genius of the ship of Theseus paradox is that it is not about a ship at all. The ship is a metaphor for every object and concept that undergoes change over time. Its profound implications extend far beyond the realm of metaphysics, touching on our understanding of ourselves, our societies, and even our most cherished traditions. Consider yourself. The cells in your body are constantly dying and regenerating. Scientists estimate that the majority of the cells you had at birth have been replaced by new ones. In a physical sense, you are a completely different person than you were as a child, yet you are still the same person. What makes you you? Is it your memories, your personality, your consciousness? The paradox suggests that our identity is not a static thing, but a dynamic and ever-evolving process. We are, like the ship of Theseus, a continuous thread of being, one that is woven from the experiences of our past, the choices of our present, and the potential of our future. The paradox teaches us that to be a person is to be in a constant state of becoming. The paradox also applies to concepts like nations and cultures. A nation's population changes over time through birth, death, and immigration. Its laws and customs evolve. Its physical landscape is transformed by new buildings and infrastructure. Is the United States of today the same nation as it was 100 years ago? In a physical sense, no. But in a historical, cultural, and political sense, many would argue yes. Its identity is not tied to its physical borders or its specific population at any given time, but to a continuous narrative that connects its past to its present. The paradox shows us that the identity of a nation is not an unchanging truth, but a living story that is constantly being written and rewritten by its people. Furthermore, the paradox challenges our understanding of the digital world. What is an app that is constantly being updated, where its original code has entirely been replaced? Is it still
The Catch-22 paradox, the absurdity of a no-win situation? In the sweltering heat of a military base during World War II, a squadron of bombardiers is living a waking nightmare. One of them, a man named Yosarian, is desperate to stop flying dangerous missions. He's a sane man in an insane world, and he wants out. He learns that there is a way to be excused from duty. If a man is insane, he can be grounded. All he has to do is ask.
This seems like a straightforward solution, a beacon of hope in the middle of chaos. But there's a catch, a single, devilish clause that turns the entire system on its head. The rule states, a man who flies these missions must be crazy and he can be grounded if he proves he is. But if he asks to be grounded, it proves he's sane because only a rational person would want to stop flying such deadly missions. Therefore, he must be sane and must continue to fly. This is the core of Catch-22, a paradox that has seeped from the pages of Joseph Heller's 1961 novel into the very lexicon of our language. It's not just a clever phrase, it's a profound and often terrifying description of a no-win situation, a logical trap where every option seems to cancel itself out. The Catch-22 is a circular nightmare, a system of rules that ensures no one can ever escape it. It's a paradox of bureaucratic logic, a reflection of the absurdity of war, and a devastating commentary on the human condition. It reveals how rules, which are supposed to bring order and clarity, can be weaponized to create confusion and maintain power. This essay will explore the origins of this paradox, its chilling applications in the real world, and what it tells us about our relentless, and often futile, struggle against the systems that govern our lives. The genius of Catch-22 lies in its ability to capture a specific, soul-crushing form of frustration. It's not just a tough choice, it's a choice that is designed to be impossible. It's the feeling that the game is rigged from the start and that your own rational actions are being used against you. The paradox is a mirror reflecting the absurdity we encounter in bureaucracies, in flawed legal systems, and in a world where logic, when applied without empathy or common sense, can become a tool of oppression. This isn't just a puzzle for philosophers. It's a lived experience for anyone who has ever felt trapped by a system that refuses to make sense. Heller's novel, a scathing satire of war and bureaucracy, gave this phenomenon a name and a narrative. But the paradox itself is older than the book. It is the feeling of being caught in a self-referential loop, where the rules of the game are the problem, not a solution. The Catch-22 is a testament to the fact that some of the most profound truths about human experience are not found in grand philosophical statements, but in the simple, brutal logic of a system designed to be inescapable. Part 2. The core logic of a devilish rule. To understand the full scope of Catch-22, we must first deconstruct the simple yet devastating logic of the rule itself. In Joseph Heller's novel, the rule is a brilliant piece of literary engineering. It's not a secret, it's a widely known, albeit unwritten rule of the military. It states that a man is considered insane if he keeps flying deadly missions, but if he wants to stop flying them, he's considered sane. This one rule creates a perfect airtight loop of contradiction that guarantees the pilots can never be grounded. The paradox works by using a person's own rational, self-preserving instinct against them. Yossarian, the novel's protagonist, is acting on a logical human impulse, the desire to stay alive. In any other context, his request to be grounded would be a perfectly reasonable act. But within the framework of Catch-22, this very act of reason is twisted and perverted into a sign of his sanity. The rule, therefore, does not allow for a genuine expression of insanity. An insane person would be too unhinged to make a rational request, and a sane person's rational request is automatically interpreted as a sign of sanity, thereby disqualifying them. It's a trap that uses the very logic of the victim to justify their continued suffering. The genius of this paradox lies in its circular nature. The problem is also the solution. The very thing that would allow a person to escape, the desire to escape, is what proves they cannot. This circular reasoning is a hallmark of bureaucratic absurdism. It's a world where the system's internal consistency is valued more than the well-being of the people it's supposed to serve.
The rule is not designed to help, it's designed to maintain the status quo, to keep the pilots flying, and to keep the war machine running. The logic of Catch-22 is not humane, but it is, in a horrifying way, impeccable. Heller's paradox is a form of self-referential logic. Similar to the liar's paradox, this statement is false. But where the liar's paradox exists in the abstract world of language, Catch-22 exists in the real world of power and consequences. The paradox is not just an intellectual puzzle, it's a matter of life and death. The pilots aren't just grappling with an unsolvable riddle, they are literally facing the consequences of a system that has chosen its own perverse logic over their lives. The feeling of being caught in a Catch-22 is not the feeling of confusion, but the feeling of utter, soul-crushing helplessness. It's the moment you realize that all of your rational thought, all of your appeals to common sense are being used to justify a system that has already decided your fate. The core logic of the paradox is a chilling reminder that in some cases, the most dangerous thing in the world is a set of rules that makes perfect sense to the people in charge, even if it's designed to trap everyone else. Part 3. From War to the Everyday. The Paradox in Real Life. The reason Catch-22 has become a timeless concept is that its logic extends far beyond the confines of a World War II military base. It's a brilliant metaphor for the frustrations and absurdities we face in our own lives, a way of describing the moments we are trapped by systems that seem to defy all reason. The paradox is a powerful tool for explaining why some problems seem impossible to solve and why some fights seem impossible to win. One of the most common real-world manifestations of Catch-22 is in job hunting. It is the infamous dilemma of the entry-level job requiring 3 years of experience. But how do you get 3 years of experience if every entry-level job demands it? This is a Catch-22. The very thing you need to get the job is something you can only get by having the job. The system is a closed loop, and it leaves young, ambitious people feeling hopeless and frustrated, unable to get their foot in the door because the door is locked from the inside. This paradox is a reflection of a system that, while seemingly designed to screen for qualified candidates, unintentionally locks out an entire generation of talent. Another classic example is in bureaucracy. Imagine needing to get a certain form approved, but to get the form approved, you need to provide a document that can only be obtained from the same bureaucratic office which requires the approved form to issue. This is a Catch-22 of red tape, a logical knot that is a common feature of inefficient and convoluted systems. It's a problem of circular dependency, where one task is impossible without another, and that other is impossible without the first. The people in charge of the system are often blind to this paradox, or they simply accept it as the way things are, leaving the individual to navigate a maze of their own making. The paradox also appears in healthcare and insurance. In some cases, a patient may need a pre-approval for a medical procedure, but the insurance company will only grant the pre-approval after the procedure has already been performed. Or a patient needs a specific treatment to get a diagnosis, but the insurance company won't cover the treatment without a diagnosis. This is a Catch-22 of medical and financial logic, a devastating example of how systems designed to help can become a source of immense suffering and frustration. It is a situation where the patient, the most vulnerable person in the entire equation, is trapped in a logical loop between the healthcare provider and the insurance company, a loop that has no clear path to a solution. The Catch-22, it seems, is everywhere, a dark thread that runs through the fabric of our personal, professional, and social lives, a chilling reminder that the world is often far less rational than we would like it to be. Part 4. Power, Absurdity, and the Human Condition. Beyond its practical applications, Catch-22 is a profound philosophical commentary on power, absurdity, and the human condition. It is a brutal exploration of what happens when a system's internal logic takes precedence over human dignity and common sense. The paradox reveals a hierarchy of power where the rules are not designed for justice or fairness, but for control. The people who create and enforce the rules are not subject to them, and they are immune to the paradoxes they create. This is the ultimate and most terrifying lesson of the Catch-22. In Heller's novel, the senior officers are not trapped by Catch-22, they are the architects of it. They are the ones who benefit from the pilots continuing to fly missions. And
The Sorites paradox. How many grains of sand make a heap? Imagine standing on a vast, wind-swept beach with billions upon billions of tiny grains of sand stretching out to the horizon. In your hand, you hold a single grain. Is this a heap? The answer, intuitively, is no. You drop another grain next to it. Are 2 grains a heap? Still no. You continue this process, meticulously adding 1 grain at a time. 3 grains, 4, 10, 100. At what point, at what exact precise number of grains does the collection suddenly transform from not a heap into a heap? This seemingly simple question lies at the heart of the Sorites paradox, a fascinating thought experiment that has puzzled philosophers and logicians for over 2 millennia. The name Sorites comes from the Greek word soros, which means heap. It's a paradox that reveals the inherent flaws in our language and in our reasoning when we try to define concepts that are vague and lack clear boundaries. At its core, the paradox challenges our reliance on simple, binary categories: heap or not a heap, bald or not bald, rich or poor, and forces us to confront the gray areas that exist in every aspect of our lives. The paradox is not about finding the right number of grains of sand, it's about exposing the fact that no such number can logically exist. It's a journey into the philosophical heart of ambiguity, and a powerful reminder that our words, our logic, and our perceptions of reality are often far less precise than we assume. The structure of the paradox is disarmingly simple. It rests on 2 seemingly undeniable premises. A single grain of sand is not a heap. And if a collection of grains is not a heap, then adding just 1 more grain does not make it a heap. From these 2 premises, a devastating conclusion can be drawn through a process of inductive reasoning. If 1 grain is not a heap, and adding 1 more doesn't change that, then 2 grains are not a heap. And if 2 grains are not a heap, adding 1 more doesn't change that, so 3 grains are not a heap. This reasoning continues indefinitely, leading to the absurd conclusion that no amount of grains of sand can ever form a heap. We know from experience that this is false. A huge pile of sand on a beach is unequivocally a heap. The contradiction between our logical reasoning and our real-world observation is what makes the Sorites paradox so compelling and so difficult to resolve. The paradox is not just a quirky brain teaser about sand, it applies to any concept that exists on a spectrum. Think about a person with a full head of hair. If they lose 1 hair, are they bald? No. If they lose another, still no. The paradox argues that you can never reach a state of baldness by losing 1 hair at a time. It applies to wealth. At what exact dollar amount does a person go from being well off to rich? It applies to age. At what precise moment does a person cease to be young and become old? The Sorites paradox is an exploration of the fuzzy boundaries of our language and a mirror reflecting our own discomfort with ambiguity. It challenges us to reconsider whether a world of binary categories is just a convenient fiction we have created to make sense of a reality that is far more fluid and complex. Part 2. the 3 proposed solutions, and why they all fail. Over the centuries, philosophers have proposed numerous solutions to the Sorites paradox, each attempting to untangle the logical knot. However, the true power of the paradox lies in the fact that every proposed solution seems to create its own set of problems, proving that there is no easy way out of this logical trap. The first and most intuitive solution is to simply draw a line. This approach, often called epistemicism, argues that there is a precise, definite point at which a collection of grains becomes a heap. We just don't know what that point is. For example, a philosopher might argue that 1,000 grains of sand is a heap, but 999 is not. The paradox from this perspective is not a problem with reality or logic, but a problem with our knowledge. Our language, being imprecise, prevents us from knowing the exact boundary, but the boundary itself exists. The problem with the solution is that it feels deeply unsatisfying and arbitrary. What special property does the 1,000th grain have that the 999th grain does not? Why would a single, insignificant grain have the power to fundamentally change the category of an entire collection? This solution, while logically consistent, feels like it violates our common sense intuition about how things gradually change. The second solution, known as supervaluationism, suggests that the problem lies not in our ignorance of a precise line, but in the fact that there is no single true line at all. Instead, there are many possible, equally valid lines we could draw. The statement 1,000 grains is a heap would be considered true in some of these valuations or interpretations and false in others. A statement is only truly true if it's true in all valuations, and only false if it's false in all of them. The statements 1 grain is a heap and 1 billion grains is a heap would have clear truth values, but the statement 1,000 grains is a heap is neither definitively true nor definitively false, because some valuations would consider it a heap, while others would not. This approach elegantly handles the problem of drawing a single arbitrary line. However, it also introduces a new kind of vagueness where we can no longer say with certainty whether a statement is true or false. It suggests that our logic system, in the face of ambiguity, must abandon the law of the excluded middle, where every statement is either true or false. The third solution, fuzzy logic, attempts to address the problem by abandoning binary categories altogether. Instead of heap or not a heap, this approach introduces a continuum of truth, where a statement can be partially true. A collection of 1 grain might be a heap with a truth value of 0.0001, while a billion grains might have a truth value of 9.9999. The statement 1,000 grains is a heap would have a truth value somewhere in the middle, perhaps 0.5. The key here is that adding 1 more grain only infinitesimally increases the truth value, so there is no single moment of transformation. The problem with this solution is that it fundamentally alters the way we think about logic. It allows for a statement to be both true and false to some degree, which challenges centuries of classical reasoning. It also begs the question of where this continuous scale comes from. While fuzzy logic is incredibly useful in computer science and engineering, think about how a smart thermostat gradually increases the heat, it feels less applicable to the core philosophical problem of what a heap truly is. The failure of these 3 solutions to fully and satisfyingly resolve the paradox is a testament to its enduring power. It shows us that the paradox is not an error to be corrected, but a fundamental feature of the relationship between language, logic, and a reality that is often too complex for our simple categories. The real lesson may not be in finding a solution, but in recognizing that some problems are not meant to be solved within their own framework.
Part 3. From piles of sand to real-world dilemmas. The Sorites paradox is more than just a philosophical game. It has profound implications for how we make sense of the world, for the laws we create, and for the ethical dilemmas we face every day. The paradox highlights the dangers of vague concepts in systems that require absolute precision. In the legal world, for example, the paradox of vagueness is a constant challenge. Laws often rely on terms like reasonable doubt, excessive force, or cruel and unusual punishment. These terms are intentionally left flexible to accommodate the nuances of each individual case. However, this flexibility also creates room for interpretation and disagreement. A single punch in a bar fight might not constitute excessive force, but what about 2 or 3? The paradox shows us that there is no clear line, and judges and juries are forced to make subjective decisions about where to draw that line. The paradox, in this sense, is not a problem to be solved, but a fundamental tension within the legal system. It is a reminder that justice, while striving for objectivity, is often a messy, subjective process. The paradox also applies to ethical and social issues. Consider
The friendship paradox, when your friends seem more popular than you. Have you ever scrolled through social media and seen your friends constantly appearing in large group photos, at bustling parties, and in the friend lists of countless other people? Have you ever felt a vague sense of unease, an unintentional comparison? Why do my friends seem to have more friends than I do? This feeling isn't just a fleeting thought. It can burrow into your mind, planting a seed of insecurity. It makes you question yourself, whether you're too introverted, if you're living a boring life, or if you're simply less popular. The truth is, you are not alone, and that feeling is not an illusion. It's a real phenomenon known as the friendship paradox. This is an astonishing paradox, a statistical truth that our intuition struggles to accept. On average, your friends have more friends than you do. This might sound illogical, even like a cruel joke from the universe, but it has been proven by mathematics and network science. It is not a flaw in how we perceive ourselves, but an inherent characteristic of how social networks are formed. This paradox is not just a mathematical curiosity. It is a mirror that directly reflects our deepest fears and insecurities, especially in a world where personal worth seems to be measured by the number of connections and interactions. It forces us to re-examine the nature of relationships, comparison, and our own selves. Is it possible to find peace in a world built on numbers and comparisons? And can this truth help us free ourselves from the burden of popularity? Part 1. The harsh truth and the social network problem. Back then, I was a student full of ideals. I believed that all relationships were based on equality, that friendship was a bond connecting two people with similar values. I had a close-knit group of friends. We would hang out, confide in each other, and share everything in our lives. In our group, there was a friend named Anne. Anne was outgoing, had a great sense of humor, and was always full of energy. She seemed to know everyone on campus. Every time I was with Anne, I'd see her greeting, shaking hands, and chatting with so many people I didn't know. I used to think Anne is so lucky she can connect with the world so easily. That feeling often made me feel small. Anne had 100 friends on social media, while I only had 30. Anne was always invited to lively parties, while I was only invited to intimate, cozy gatherings. I wondered, was Anne a better friend than me, or was she simply better than me in some way? The friendship paradox emerged as a cold but accurate explanation. It was discovered by sociologist Scott L. Feld in 1991. Feld presented a simple yet powerful mathematical argument. In a social network, when you randomly select a person, there's a chance they have fewer friends than the network's average. But when you randomly select one of their friends, that friend has a higher chance of being one of the people with more friends than the network's average. Why this difference? Imagine a small city.
Within it, there are a few wide main roads that connect all the areas, and there are hundreds, thousands of small alleys that serve only a few houses. If you randomly select a road, you might pick an alley. But if you randomly select a person and ask them, "Where do you live?" and then asked what road is nearby, the chances are high that they'll point to a main road. Why? Because more people use the main roads, so the probability of you meeting someone on one is higher. In a social network, people with many friends are like the main roads. They are the hubs connecting many other people. Your relationship with them is like a small alley connecting to a main road. Therefore, when you look at your friends, you tend to look at these hubs more often. Because popular people have a huge number of connections, they have more opportunities to become your friend than an introverted person with only a few close friends. This is a simple statistical bias, completely unrelated to your personal worth or attractiveness. Understanding this paradox is like seeing a hidden matrix in everyday life. My feeling when comparing myself to Anne was not a flaw in me, but an accurate reflection of how our networks were structured. Anne was not a better friend than me. Anne was simply a hub, and I was one of her many connections. And that is a completely different distinction. Part 2. The psychology of comparison in the digital age. If this paradox were just a statistical problem, it would not have such a powerful impact. Its true power lies in how it affects the human psyche in the digital age. Social media has become a perfect platform for the friendship paradox to unleash its full potential for harm. Every day, we scroll through personal profiles not to connect deeply, but to see a curated and polished summary of other people's lives. We see pictures of our friends on luxurious trips, at bustling parties, and in the friend lists of countless other people. We don't see the rainy days, the exhausting work hours, or the lonely moments they also experience. And this is where the friendship paradox begins its destruction. Because your friends tend to be more popular than you will see more of their photos from glamorous events. You will see more of their posts about successes and joys shared with countless others. This creates a powerful illusion. Everyone is living a more interesting life than I am. I once fell into this trap. I had another friend named Bing, a handsome and talented guy. Bing's social media was full of photos of him meeting celebrities, going on volunteer trips to distant places, and showcasing his academic achievements. Looking at it, I felt a simmering envy. I saw my life as small and mundane. While I was at home reading a book, Bing was exploring the world. While I was struggling with my own small problems, Bing was doing great things. I didn't realize that Bing was also another hub. The life I saw on social media was just a small, carefully selected part of his life. I didn't see the pressures Bing faced, the difficulties he had to overcome to achieve those successes. I let the friendship paradox deceive me, making me believe that my comparison was logical and my life was lacking. Psychological studies have shown that this social comparison is one of the main causes of anxiety, depression, and feelings of inadequacy. When we are ambushed by the amplified images of the paradox, we begin to believe that we are an exception, a flawed individual in a society full of successful and happy people. But the friendship paradox reminds us that such a comparison is unfair. It's like comparing a small alley to a highway. Both have their own value, both serve their own purpose, but they cannot be measured on the same scale. And that, in a way, relieved me and helped me accept myself a little more. Part 3. Practical applications and a deeper meaning. The friendship paradox is not limited to a puzzling truth about personal lives. It has become a powerful tool with surprising practical applications, proving that the seemingly most insignificant things can bring great benefits to society. One of the most notable applications is in public health. Imagine a pandemic breaks out, and health authorities need to vaccinate the community quickly and effectively. Vaccinating the entire population is impossible, so how do you stop the spread? The friendship paradox provided a clever solution. Instead of randomly selecting people for vaccination, scientists used this paradox to identify the hubs in the social network. They would randomly select a few people and then ask them to randomly select one of their friends, and they would vaccinate those friends. Why is this more effective? Because the friends who were selected were highly likely to be the popular hubs, the people with the most social connections. By vaccinating them, scientists created a protective barrier around the network, preventing the virus from spreading from these hubs to others. This method has been shown to be able to predict and slow the spread of a disease more effectively than random vaccination. The applications of this paradox are not limited to healthcare. In the field of computer and network science, it helps researchers understand how information spreads. Our popular friends not only have more friends, but they are also more likely to be exposed to new information, breaking news, or a new trend. By focusing on these hubs, scientists can predict and track the spread of news, fake news, or a market trend. Even in business, the friendship paradox is valuable. A company that wants to promote a new product, instead of randomly selecting a group of people for a trial, can use this paradox to reach the most influential people in their social networks. These hubs, with their powerful information spreading ability, can help the company's product reach a large number of potential customers quickly. The friendship paradox teaches us a profound lesson. A network is not a collection of isolated nodes, but a complex ecosystem where some nodes have more influence than others. By understanding this mechanism, we can not only explain our own personal feelings, but also leverage it to create positive impacts on a large scale. Part 4. Overcoming the comparison trap and finding true meaning. The truth about the friendship paradox can, at first, cause a sense of discomfort. It might make you feel truly small and inadequate. But when you look deeper, you will see that this paradox is not a criticism, but a liberation. It liberates you from the burden of comparison. My feeling of insecurity when looking at Anne's or Bing's profiles was no longer a reflection of my self-worth.
The stability-instability paradox, when security breeds conflict. In the history of human conflict, there has always been a fundamental tension between the pursuit of stability and the inevitability of change. Nations and empires have long sought to create systems of security, be they through vast armies, intricate alliances, or technological superiority, with the ultimate goal of preserving peace. But what if the very success of these efforts to secure peace at the highest level paradoxically creates the conditions for more frequent, if smaller conflicts at a lower level? This is the chilling and counterintuitive logic of the stability-instability paradox, a concept that emerged from the crucible of the Cold War but is proven to have enduring relevance in a world far more complex than the bipolar standoff that defined the 20th century. The paradox forces us to confront a profound question. Can a system of ultimate security, designed to prevent a catastrophic war, inadvertently encourage lesser forms of aggression? The answer, as history has shown time and again, is a resounding yes. The paradox is not a flaw in our logic, but a fundamental feature of how power, deterrence, and human nature interact within complex, interconnected systems. It is the story of how the very thing that gives us a sense of safety can embolden us to take risks we otherwise would not. This essay will delve into the origins of this paradox, tracing its roots to the nuclear standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. It will then expand its scope to explore how this same dynamic manifests in modern geopolitics, from proxy wars and cyber warfare to economic rivalries and the balance of power in an increasingly multipolar world. We will see that the stability-instability paradox is a mirror, reflecting our own strategic shortcomings and reminding us that the pursuit of peace requires a nuanced understanding of its unintended consequences.
The genesis of the paradox is deeply intertwined with the development of nuclear weapons. For the first time in history, humanity possessed the power to destroy itself completely. This created a new strategic reality known as mutually assured destruction, or MAD, a state of equilibrium where a full-scale nuclear war between the superpowers would result in the complete annihilation of both sides, making such a conflict unthinkable. This immense, terrifying threat of nuclear winter created a fragile but powerful form of stability. The United States and the Soviet Union, despite their deep ideological animosity, were locked in a stalemate, bound by the shared knowledge that a direct conflict would mean the end of civilization. The global peace was, in a sense, underwritten by the ultimate threat of total war. But while this fear of escalation prevented a World War III, it didn't stop conflict. It simply changed its nature. The paradox was born. The stability at the highest level, the prevention of nuclear war, unleashed a torrent of instability at lower levels as both superpowers felt emboldened to engage in a host of smaller, localized conflicts, proxy wars, and covert operations, all while knowing that the ultimate check and balance of nuclear deterrence would keep things from spinning completely out of control. This intricate dance of calculated risk and restraint is the very essence of the paradox. The Cold War-era paradox also manifested in other ways, such as the strategic arms race itself. Both sides, seeking to ensure their second strike capability and maintain the delicate balance of MAD, poured trillions of dollars into developing new, more powerful, and more accurate nuclear weapons. This arms race, while a form of competition, was also a strategy to maintain stability. The constant one-upping was a way to signal to the other side, we are not falling behind. We are just as capable of annihilating you as you are of annihilating us. The pursuit of superior weaponry was not about winning a war, but about preventing one. This strange and terrifying form of stability was a balance built on a foundation of ever-increasing destructive power. The arms race was a paradox within a paradox, an act of constant escalation designed to maintain a static, unchanging state of non-conflict. The Cold War showed us in vivid and terrifying detail that the path to peace is not always a straight line, and that the illusion of stability can be the greatest catalyst for covert and localized warfare. The world in the decades that followed would see this same dynamic play out in different arenas, proving that the paradox was not a one-off phenomenon, but a fundamental aspect of human strategy. With the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, many believed that the world would enter a new era of peace and cooperation. The specter of a nuclear Armageddon had seemingly been lifted, and with it, the stability-instability paradox was thought to be a relic of a bygone era. But as history has proven time and again, a paradox is not something that is simply solved. It is something that remanifests in new and unexpected ways. The fundamental dynamic of a stable environment encouraging unstable behavior has found fertile ground in the 21st century, shifting from the grand stage of nuclear strategy to the more nuanced and often more subtle arenas of modern conflict. The most prominent modern manifestation of the paradox is in cybersecurity. As nations and corporations have built increasingly sophisticated and robust digital infrastructures, they have also created a new domain for warfare and espionage. A direct, full-scale cyber attack on a rival nation's critical infrastructure, the equivalent of a digital first strike, is a high-risk, high-consequence action. It could provoke a physical retaliation or be interpreted as an act of war, potentially triggering an unpredictable escalation. This immense risk creates a form of strategic stability in the digital world, deterring overt cyber warfare between major powers. But this stability has in turn unleashed a torrent of low-level cyber instability. Nations engage in constant cyber espionage, intellectual property theft,
and the use of state-sponsored hackers to sow discord, steal data, or influence elections. These gray zone activities are designed to be deniable and to fall below the threshold of a conventional military response. The stability of not launching a full-scale cyber attack has made these smaller covert attacks more probable, as actors feel they can operate with a degree of impunity. The paradox, once about nuclear weapons, is now about code and data packets. This dynamic also plays out in economic conflicts. While a direct military confrontation between major economic rivals is unthinkable in today's globalized world, the stability of this non-conflict environment has led to a rise in economic instability. Nations engage in aggressive trade wars, impose tariffs, and use economic sanctions as tools of foreign policy. These actions, while not acts of war, are forms of economic aggression designed to weaken a rival, gain a competitive advantage, and project power without risking military engagement. The paradox means that the very stability of a globalized, interconnected economy, which prevents military conflict, gives rise to a more unstable and unpredictable environment of economic rivalry. The stability of peace between nations has encouraged instability in the markets they depend on. Furthermore, we see the paradox in the rise of non-state actors in asymmetric warfare. In a world where major powers are deterred from fighting each other, the strategic landscape is opened up for smaller non-state groups to operate. These groups, whether they are terrorist organizations, rebel factions, or criminal syndicates, can launch attacks and sow chaos with a degree of anonymity and deniability that nation-states cannot afford. The stability created by the balance of power between nations has inadvertently empowered those who exist outside of that framework, leading to a new form of instability that is decentralized, unpredictable, and far more difficult to contain. The paradox, it seems, is a constant force in human systems, and as one form of conflict is suppressed, another is always waiting to fill the void. The stability-instability paradox is not merely a description of geopolitical events. It's a profound commentary on the psychology of decision-making under conditions of security. It reveals how a perceived sense of safety at one level can distort an actor's risk assessment at another, leading to miscalculations and unintended consequences. To truly understand the paradox, one must look beyond the macro level of global politics and delve into the human incentives and biases that drive it. The psychological dimension of the paradox is rooted in a phenomenon known as moral hazard. In finance, moral hazard occurs when a party protected from risk behaves differently than if they were fully exposed to the risk. The Cold War's mad doctrine, in a strategic sense, created a form of moral hazard. Because the superpowers were protected from the ultimate risk of nuclear annihilation, they were more willing to engage in risky, low-level conflicts.
The value paradox, unraveling the mystery of diamonds and water. Imagine two items placed before you, a single glistening diamond and a cool, refreshing glass of water. If you were asked which is more valuable, your immediate gut-level answer might be the diamond. After all, diamonds are rare, beautiful, and cost a fortune. You've been told your whole life they are symbols of love and wealth. But what if you weren't standing in a brightly lit jewelry store? What if you were stranded in a vast, desolate desert, dying of thirst? In that moment, the diamond's sparkle would mean nothing. The glass of water, which you might otherwise take for granted, would become priceless. It is quite literally the difference between life and death. This thought experiment lies at the heart of the value paradox, also famously known as the diamond water paradox. It's a puzzle that has haunted economists and thinkers for centuries, challenging our most fundamental assumptions about worth, utility, and the things we cherish. First articulated by the father of modern economics, Adam Smith, this paradox asks a simple but profound question. Why is water, which is essential for life, so cheap and abundant, while diamonds, which are a non-essential luxury, are so expensive and rare?
The contradiction isn't just an interesting riddle, it's a doorway into a deeper understanding of human decision-making, the mechanics of markets, and the subjective nature of value itself. This isn't just about economics, it's about psychology, philosophy, and the very way we perceive the world around us. To fully appreciate this paradox is to deconstruct the very notion of worth, and to realize that the things we take for granted may hold the most profound value of all. For a long time, this paradox seemed to defy a simple answer. It was a cognitive knot, a point of friction between what we instinctively know to be true, that water is more important for survival, and how our markets actually behave, where diamonds command astronomical prices. It challenged the very idea of an objective, intrinsic value. How could a substance that a human being couldn't live without be valued less than a shiny rock? This essay will delve into the journey of this paradox, from its inception to its resolution, exploring the key economic concepts that finally untangled the knot. We'll discover that the answer doesn't lie in the absolute importance of a good, but in its relative scarcity and the incremental satisfaction it provides. We will see how this paradox, once a symbol of economic fusion, has become a powerful lens through which we can understand not only markets and pricing, but also human behavior and the values that shape our modern world. The paradox forces us to reconsider a simple question. What exactly do we mean by value? Is value a measure of necessity, of how much something contributes to our survival and well-being? Or is it a measure of how much someone is willing to pay for it? The diamond water paradox argues that these two types of value are not the same, and their divergence is the source of the confusion. The first is use value, or utility, the subjective worth an individual gets from consuming a good. The second is exchange value, the price a good commands in a market. The paradox exists because water has immense use value but very low exchange value, while diamonds have low use value but astronomical exchange value. The resolution of this paradox, as we will explore, lies in understanding that markets don't price things based on their total utility, but on something far more nuanced and dynamic, the utility of the very last unit consumed. Part 2. Marginal utility to the rescue. For centuries, thinkers struggled with the diamond water paradox because they were thinking in terms of total utility. The total utility of water is without question infinite. There is no life without it. The total utility of diamonds, on the other hand, is finite and, in the grand scheme of things, quite low. A human being can live a full, happy life without ever seeing a diamond. But this way of thinking, while intuitively appealing, fundamentally misunderstands how markets work. It wasn't until the late 19th century that economists, most notably the marginalist school, led by figures like Carl Menger and William Stanley Jevons, discovered the key to unlocking the paradox, the concept of marginal utility. Marginal utility is the additional satisfaction or benefit that a person gets from consuming one more unit of a good or service. This is the crucial distinction. We don't make purchasing decisions based on the total value of a good, but on the value of the next incremental unit. Think of it this way. The first glass of water you have after being stranded in the desert is worth everything. Your life, your hope, your very soul. Its marginal utility is immeasurable. But what about the 100th glass of water? Sitting in a kitchen where the tap water is free and flowing, its marginal utility is virtually zero. You wouldn't pay for it because your needs have already been met. The value of a good in a market is therefore determined not by its total utility, but by its marginal utility. It's the value that the last unit brings you. Now let's apply this concept to the paradox. Water in most parts of the world is incredibly abundant. Because we have so much of it, the marginal utility of one more glass is very low. We are at a point of near saturation. So while its total utility is immeasurably high, its price, which is determined by the value of the last unit sold, is very low. Diamonds, in contrast, are exceedingly rare. We are at the very beginning of the supply curve. The marginal utility of a first or even second diamond is extremely high, driven by its scarcity, its symbolic value, and its aesthetic appeal. Because there are so few of them are satisfied.
The value of that last available diamond is immense, and its price reflects that. The market is therefore not being irrational, it's being perfectly rational, pricing goods based on the satisfaction derived from the last unit sold, not the overall importance of the good to human life. This resolution of the paradox was a pivotal moment in the history of economics. It shifted the focus from objective, labor-based theories of value to subjective, consumer-based theories of value. It taught us that value is not an inherent property of a good, but a function of its supply, its context, and the individual's subjective preferences. The diamond isn't valuable because a lot of labor went into mining it. It's valuable because someone out there is willing to pay an enormous price for it, and because there are so few of them to go around. Part 3. Beyond economics, the paradox in real life. While the marginal utility theory provides a neat economic solution, the value paradox extends beyond the realm of supply and demand curves. It offers a powerful lens through which we can view human behavior, psychology, and our often distorted sense of what truly matters. The paradox shows us that what we take for granted is often the most important thing of all. Consider the air we breathe. Its use value is immeasurable. Without it, we die in minutes. But its marginal utility is zero. We don't pay for air because it is so abundant that we have an infinite supply. But imagine for a moment a world where clean air is scarce. We are seeing glimpses of this in densely populated, polluted cities where people buy bottled oxygen or air purifiers. In these contexts, the marginal utility of a single breath of clean air suddenly skyrockets, and people are willing to pay a premium for it. The paradox of the air we breathe is no longer a paradox in a world where it becomes a scarce commodity. The paradox also highlights our human tendency to chase what is scarce and to undervalue what is abundant. This psychological bias is a driving force behind consumerism and our obsession with luxury goods. We don't buy a diamond because we need it. We buy it because it is a rare symbol of status and wealth. The very fact that it is difficult to obtain makes it more desirable. Conversely, we often fail to appreciate the things in our lives that are essential and abundant: our health, our family, our community, clean water and air. We take them for granted until they become scarce, until they are threatened by illness, loss, or environmental crisis. The paradox, in this sense, is a cautionary tale about our own priorities. It challenges us to reflect on the things we spend our time, energy, and money on. Are we chasing the shiny new thing, the diamond? Or are we nurturing the essential, often overlooked things, the water? The paradox suggests that a life spent in pursuit of what is merely scarce while neglecting what is truly essential is a life built on a flawed sense of value. Moreover, the paradox has profound implications for global issues. In many parts of the world, clean, accessible water is not abundant. In drought-stricken regions or areas with poor infrastructure, water's marginal utility is incredibly high. In these contexts, the value paradox dissolves, and water becomes a highly valuable commodity, often a source of conflict and inequality. The paradox reminds us that abundance is not a universal constant, and that the perceived value of a good is deeply tied to its availability and the specific context of human need. Part 4. The modern market and the power of perception. The value paradox has been resolved by economic theory, but it remains a relevant and powerful concept for understanding the modern market. Today, the paradox is not just about diamonds and water. It's about the entire ecosystem of goods and services we consume. In a world saturated with choices, the marginal utility of a good is often determined less by its physical properties and more by marketing, branding, and perceived exclusivity. Consider the luxury goods market. A high-end handbag or a designer watch, in terms of its functional utility, is not significantly more valuable than its mass-market counterpart, but its price is orders of magnitude higher. This is because its value is almost entirely based on its perceived scarcity and its role as a status symbol. The marginal utility of owning that specific brand, that specific style, is driven by the desire for exclusivity and the social.
The hedonism paradox. Why chasing happiness can make you unhappy. We are a society obsessed with happiness. From self-help books promising the 7 steps to joy, to social media feeds showcasing curated moments of bliss, the message is clear. Happiness is a goal.
an end state to be pursued and captured. We are told to find our bliss, to follow our joy, and to maximize pleasure in every aspect of our lives. On the surface, this makes perfect sense. Who wouldn't want to be happy? But what if this relentless pursuit of happiness is precisely what makes it so elusive? What if the harder you chase happiness, the further away it gets? This is the central idea of the hedonism paradox, a fascinating and counterintuitive concept that challenges our most basic assumptions about pleasure and a meaningful life. The paradox reveals a strange and profound truth. When you make pleasure your ultimate goal, it often eludes you. This isn't a flaw in our desire for happiness, but a fundamental feature of how human psychology and emotional well-being actually work. It's a paradox that has been explored by philosophers and psychologists for centuries, from the ancient Greeks to modern-day positive psychology. This essay will delve into the origins of this paradox, explore its psychological mechanisms, examine its modern manifestations in a consumer-driven culture, and offer a path forward, a way to find genuine, lasting happiness by letting go of the chase. The term hedonism comes from the Greek word hedone, meaning pleasure. As a philosophical school of thought, hedonism posits that pleasure is the highest good and the ultimate goal of human existence. The paradox, however, shows us the inherent flaw in this logic. It suggests that happiness is not a prize to be won, but a byproduct of other activities. When we fixate on the outcome, the feeling of happiness itself, we lose sight of the process, which is where true joy often resides. This essay will argue that the key to resolving the hedonism paradox lies not in rejecting pleasure, but in reframing our relationship with it, shifting our focus from the state of being happy to the act of living a meaningful, purposeful life. The paradox forces us to ask a crucial question. Is happiness a destination or a journey? In a world that sells happiness as a product, a fleeting emotion you can buy, consume, and share, the paradox acts as a powerful corrective. It reminds us that happiness is a complex and nuanced experience that cannot be bought, sold, or willed into existence. It is instead something that must ensue, as psychiatrist Viktor Frankl famously put it, as a result of living a meaningful life. This essay will be a journey into that meaning, a journey away from the relentless pursuit of pleasure and towards a deeper, more sustainable form of fulfillment. Part 2. The Psychology of the Backfire Effect. To understand the hedonism paradox, we must first explore the psychological mechanisms that cause the relentless pursuit of happiness to backfire. It's a phenomenon rooted in our brain's reward system and our tendency to overthink and overanalyze our own emotional states. When we make happiness a direct goal, we engage in a process of constant evaluation. And this very act of evaluation is what makes happiness so difficult to achieve. Imagine you are at a party, determined to have the best time ever. You carefully plan every detail: what to wear, who to talk to, and what you'll say. But as the night goes on, you find yourself constantly checking in with your feelings. Am I having fun yet? Is this as good as I thought it would be? Is that person over there having more fun than I am? This self-awareness creates a form of internal pressure, a performance anxiety where you are both the actor and the critic. The more you try to force happiness, the more self-conscious you become, and the less you are able to relax and genuinely enjoy the moment. The joy, which is meant to be a spontaneous and organic experience, is suffocated by the pressure of its own expectation. This is the paradoxical effect in action. The moment you make happiness a goal, you make it harder to find. The paradox is also tied to our brain's reward system. We are wired to seek out pleasure and to avoid pain. This survival mechanism has been essential for our evolution. But in a modern world of abundance, this same mechanism can become a source of dissatisfaction. The more we chase after fleeting pleasures, a new gadget, a delicious meal, a social media like, the more our brain's reward system adapts, requiring a greater dose of pleasure to achieve the same level of satisfaction.
This creates a hedonic treadmill, a constant cycle of craving and disappointment, where the pursuit of pleasure becomes an endless, unwinnable race. The hedonism paradox, in this sense, is a critique of our own biology, a warning that our survival instincts are not always aligned with our pursuit of long-term fulfillment. Furthermore, the paradox sheds light on the nature of expectations. The more we believe that happiness is something we can and should achieve, the higher our expectations become. We begin to expect a constant state of euphoria, a life free from pain, sadness, or discomfort. But life, by its very nature, is a mix of highs and lows. By setting unrealistic expectations for happiness, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment. The paradox reminds us that a fulfilling life is not a life without sadness, but a life where we are able to embrace the full range of human emotions, including the difficult ones. Happiness turns out to be not an escape from reality, but a way of engaging with it. Part 3. The Modern Dilemma: Consumerism and the Self-Help Trap. The hedonism paradox has never been more relevant than it is today. We live in a culture that has weaponized pleasure and commodified happiness, turning our natural desire for well-being into a massive industry. From the constant stream of advertising promising that the right product will bring us joy, to a booming self-help market that offers instant solutions to our emotional problems, we are constantly being told that happiness is something we can buy, consume, or follow a set of instructions to achieve. Consumerism is a prime example of the paradox in action. We are sold the idea that a new car, a bigger house, or the latest smartphone will make us happy. The pursuit of these goods is framed as the pursuit of happiness itself. The initial high of a new gadget quickly fades, and we are left once again on the hedonic treadmill, looking for the next purchase, the next quick fix to fill the emotional void. The paradox shows us that a life built on consumerism is a life built on fleeting pleasures and constant dissatisfaction. The more we try to buy happiness, the less of it we seem to have. The self-help industry, with its focus on hacking happiness and optimizing our lives, also falls prey to the paradox. While many self-help resources offer valuable insights, the overarching message can be a subtle form of a trap. By telling us that happiness is a skill we can master or a formula we can follow, they turn our inner life into a project to be managed. This reinforces the idea that happiness is a direct goal, something to be pursued and captured. The paradox in this context challenges us to step back from the project of making ourselves happy and instead to focus on the project of living a meaningful life, regardless of the emotional outcomes. It reminds us that some things in life, like genuine connection, purpose, and contentment, cannot be optimized or engineered. They must be cultivated over time. Social media, with its curated images of perfect lives, adds another layer of complexity. We are constantly exposed to a highlight reel of other people's happiness, which creates an implicit pressure to be happy ourselves. This leads to a form of social comparison where we measure our own emotional state against a distorted and unrealistic standard. The paradox in this case is that the more we see others being happy, the more we feel the need to be happy ourselves, and the more we feel a sense of failure when we inevitably fall short. The pursuit of happiness in this digital arena becomes a performative act, a constant effort to prove to others and to ourselves that we are, in fact, happy. The modern dilemma, then, is that we are being constantly pushed toward the very behaviors that the hedonism paradox warns against. We are encouraged to chase fleeting pleasures, to treat our emotional well-being as a project, and to compare our lives to impossible standards. To escape this trap, we must first recognize its existence and then actively resist the cultural messages that perpetuate it. The solution is not to reject happiness, but to seek it indirectly, through the pursuit of deeper, more enduring values. Part 4. The Path of Meaning: Finding Happiness in Purpose. If chasing happiness directly is a dead end, what is the alternative? The solution to the hedonism paradox lies not in a new pursuit, but in a shift of focus, from pleasure to purpose. This is the path of meaning, a path that has been advocated by philosophers and spiritual leaders for centuries and is now being validated by modern psychological research. The philosopher Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, famously wrote that happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue. His idea was that true fulfillment comes from living a meaningful life, a life where we have a sense of purpose and a reason to get out of bed in the morning. He argued that we find meaning not in the absence of suffering, but in our ability to find purpose in the face of it. This is a radical departure from the idea of hedonism, suggesting that happiness is not the goal, but a welcome side effect of living a life that serves a greater purpose.
The bootstrap paradox, an impossible loop of time and causality. Imagine a young writer struggling to pen a masterpiece. One day, a mysterious stranger appears, handing her a book. This, the stranger says, is a book you will write in the future. The writer, inspired by its brilliant narrative and revolutionary ideas, spends years transcribing it word for word, eventually becoming a celebrated author. Years later, as an older, more established writer, she travels back in time to hand the book to her younger self, fulfilling the loop. The question, a mind-bending puzzle that defies all logic, is this: where did the book come from in the first place? Who wrote the original? This is the essence of the bootstrap paradox, one of the most perplexing and fascinating thought experiments in the realm of time travel. It describes a situation where an object or a piece of information exists in a continuous loop of cause and effect with no clear point of origin. It's a paradox of causality, a causal loop, where the very existence of an object depends on a future action that, in turn, depends on the object's original existence. The paradox is not a simple logical contradiction, but a profound challenge to our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of time and the linear flow of cause and effect. It suggests that if time travel were possible, some things in the universe might simply be without ever having been created. This essay will explore the origins of the bootstrap paradox, examine its philosophical and scientific implications, and delve into its popular manifestations in fiction. It's a journey into a universe where beginnings and endings blur, and where the fabric of reality itself is woven into a self-contained, impossible loop. The paradox gets its name from the phrase, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, a metaphor for an impossible task. In this case, the object or information in the loop has pulled itself up without any initial creator. It is a closed system, a self-referential entity that exists only because it was sent back in time to ensure its own creation. This is a radical departure from our everyday experience. In our world, every object has a history. A chair is built from wood. A book is written by an author, and an idea is conceived in a specific moment of time. But in the world of the bootstrap paradox, this lineage is broken. The object's history is a Mobius strip, a continuous twisting loop that has no beginning and no end. The paradox is a chilling reminder that our intuitive understanding of the world, built on the simple logic of cause and effect, may be completely insufficient for a universe where time is not a straight line. Part 2. Deconstructing the causal loop. To truly understand the bootstrap paradox, we must deconstruct its central mechanism, the causal loop. The paradox is not a one-off event, but a continuous cycle that exists only because its constituent parts are connected in a self-sustaining feedback loop. The problem is not with the actions within the loop, but with the lack of a point of origin outside of the loop. Let's use a more concrete example. The time machine blueprints. A scientist in the future invents a time machine. The scientist travels back in time and hands the completed blueprints to their younger, less experienced self. The younger self, using the blueprints, builds the machine and eventually grows up to become the older scientist who traveled back in time. The loop is complete. The time machine exists, the blueprints exist, and the scientist exists. But the fundamental question remains, where did the idea for the time machine come from in the first place? Who wrote the original? This is the heightened heading in a sentence we can't read right now.
The paradox challenges the fundamental principle of causality, which states that every effect must have a cause. In a causal loop, the effect becomes its own cause. The existence of the blueprints, the effect, is caused by the scientist traveling back in time with them. But the scientist's ability to travel back in time, the cause, is dependent on the blueprint's existence. The cause and effect are so intertwined that they become inseparable, a logical knot that cannot be untangled. The paradox forces us to consider a world where causality is not a linear chain, but a circular one. This isn't just about objects, it's about information and ideas. Imagine a musician traveling back in time with a recording of a famous song that hasn't been written yet. The musician plays the song to their younger self, who then becomes a famous musician by writing it. The song exists, but it has no original composer. The musician, in this case, is not the creator of the song, but a mere conduit, a passive participant in a causal loop that has no origin. The paradox suggests that if time travel were possible, some of our greatest works of art, science, and philosophy might not be the products of human ingenuity, but the products of a self-contained temporal anomaly. The paradox, in this sense, is not just a scientific riddle, but a profound philosophical commentary on the nature of creativity and knowledge. It asks us to question whether our ideas are truly our own, or if they are simply artifacts of a universe that is far stranger than we can possibly imagine. Part 3. The Physics and Philosophy of an Impossible Loop. The bootstrap paradox, while a staple of science fiction, is also a serious point of discussion in theoretical physics and philosophy. It forces thinkers to confront the potential reality of a nonlinear universe and the consequences for our understanding of free will and determinism. From a physics standpoint, the paradox is tied to the theoretical possibility of closed time-like curves. These are theoretical paths in space-time that loop back on themselves, allowing an object to return to its own past. While CTCs are not forbidden by Einstein's theory of general relativity, they require extreme conditions, such as a rotating black hole, that have never been observed. The existence of a causal loop, like the one in the bootstrap paradox, would be a direct consequence of a CTC. The paradox, in this context, is a kind of logical test. If the laws of physics allow for CTCs, then they must also allow for causal loops. The paradox, therefore, is not a contradiction of physics, but a profound and unsettling consequence of physics. It suggests that if time travel were possible, some things in the universe might simply be without ever having been created. The paradox, in this sense, is not just a scientific riddle, but a profound philosophical commentary on the nature of creativity and knowledge. It asks us to question whether our ideas are truly our own, or if they are simply artifacts of a universe that is far stranger than we can possibly imagine. Part 4. The Paradox in Pop Culture and Fiction. The bootstrap paradox has been a source of endless fascination for writers and filmmakers, serving as a powerful and often terrifying plot device. In fiction, the paradox is used to explore themes of fate, destiny, and the impossibility of changing the past. It is a narrative tool that allows storytellers to create a universe where the rules of causality are bent and broken in service of a greater, more compelling narrative. One of the most famous examples of the paradox is in the Terminator franchise. In the first film, the hero, Kyle Reese, is sent back in time to protect Sarah Connor. But in a shocking twist, he becomes the father of her son, John Connor, the very person he was sent back in time to protect. The paradox is the core of the film's plot. The leader of the human resistance, John Connor, only exists because his father traveled back in time to ensure his birth. The origin of John Connor is a closed loop. He exists because he sent his father back in time to ensure his own birth. The paradox in this context is not a flaw in the plot, it is the entire point. It is a brilliant and terrifying exploration of a universe where fate is not something to be escaped, but something to be fulfilled. Another classic example is in the film Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The two main characters, Bill and Ted, are trapped in a jail cell and need to get a key. They realize that they can travel into the future and their future selves will give them the key.
They do so, and in the future, their past selves, having received the key, travel back in time to give it to them. The key, like the time machine blueprints, has no origin. It simply exists within the loop, a clever and humorous use of the paradox. In a more dramatic example, the television show Dr. You often uses the paradox to explore the complexities of time travel. The doctor might find a record of an event only to discover later that they were the ones who went back in time to cause the event, creating a self-contained causal loop. These examples show that the paradox, while a source of intellectual fascination for physicists and philosophers, is also a powerful and enduring part of our cultural imagination. It is a way of exploring the idea that some things in the universe, some events, and some people might not have an origin. It is a way of telling stories about a world where the rules of time are not what we think they are. The paradox, in this sense, is a bridge between science and fiction, a place where the rules of logic are bent in service of a story that is not just entertaining, but also profoundly thought-provoking. Part 5. A final reflection on time and existence. The bootstrap paradox, in its final analysis, is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be accepted. It is a profound meditation on the nature of time, causality, and existence itself. The paradox challenges us to leave our intuitive linear understanding of time behind and to consider a universe that is far stranger and beautiful than we could ever imagine. The paradox is a powerful and humbling reminder that our own perception of reality, built on the simple logic of cause and effect, may be fundamentally incomplete. The paradox, in its deepest sense, is not about finding the beginning of a book or the origin of a song. It is about understanding
The Grand Hotel Paradox: How Infinity Bends Our Perception of Reality. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms. Every single room is occupied, and a no vacancy sign, if such a thing could exist, would be glowing brightly. The receptionist, a person of remarkable mathematical composure, looks out at the endless line of guests and greets them with a smile. It seems, for all intents and purposes, that the hotel is full. But then, a new guest arrives, a single person asking for a room. Of course, the receptionist replies without a moment's hesitation, "We have space for you." This is where the story begins to defy all common sense. How can an infinitely full hotel accommodate a new guest without turning anyone away? This is the central conceit of the Grand Hotel Paradox, a mind-bending thought experiment introduced by the German mathematician David Hilbert in the early 20th century. It is a puzzle that forces us to abandon our intuitive, finite understanding of numbers and confront the strange, counterintuitive logic of infinity. The paradox is not a trick. It's a profound demonstration of how the rules of mathematics behave in a realm beyond our everyday experience. It reveals that the word full has a completely different meaning when applied to an infinite set, and that infinity isn't just a really, really big number, it's a fundamentally different kind of quantity. This essay will delve into the mechanics of the paradox, exploring how the hotel's resourceful receptionist can accommodate not just one new guest, but an infinite number of them. We'll explore the philosophical implications of this paradox, its connection to set theory, and what it tells us about our own limited perception of a universe that may itself be infinite. The Grand Hotel Paradox is more than just a quirky mathematical riddle. It's a journey into the nature of reality itself, a powerful reminder that some of the most profound truths lie far beyond the reach of our common sense intuition. The paradox forces us to confront a fundamental assumption we make about numbers, that when you add something to a set, the set gets bigger. In our finite world, this is a universal truth. Add a single apple to a basket of 10, and you now have 11 apples. Add a single guest to a hotel with 50 rooms, and you now have 51 guests. But in the world of Hilbert's hotel, this rule breaks down. The paradox shows us that adding a single element to an infinite set does not make the set any bigger in a measurable way. It remains infinite. The Grand Hotel is not full in the way a finite hotel is full. Its fullness is a state of perpetual potential, a space that is always capable of accommodating more. The story of the Grand Hotel is a perfect piece of intellectual theater, a narrative device designed to expose the beautiful, bewildering, and often absurd truths of mathematics. Part 2. The receptionist's ingenious solution. The key to resolving the Grand Hotel paradox lies in the receptionist's ingenious and perfectly logical solution to a seemingly impossible problem. Let's return to the hotel. Every room is occupied, with a guest in room 1, a guest in room 2, a guest in room 3, and so on ad infinitum. A new guest, guest X, arrives. The receptionist, with a confident smile, makes a simple announcement to all the existing guests. "Attention, everyone," she says over the hotel's intercom. "We have a new guest. In order to make room for them, I kindly ask that each of you move to the room number 1 higher than your current room number. The guest in room 1, please move to room 2. The guest in room 2, please move to room 3. And the guest in room 3, please move to room 4. And so on. Forever." The guests, being as mathematically astute as the receptionist, follow her instructions. The guest in room N moves to room N plus 1. This single synchronized action has a breathtaking result. Room 1, which was occupied just moments ago, is now empty. The new guest, guest X, is assigned to room 1, and the hotel remains full with a new distribution of guests. No one was turned away, and the hotel successfully accommodated a new arrival. This simple solution is a brilliant demonstration of a core principle of infinity. The set of all positive integers, 1, 2, 3, and so on, is an infinite set. The set of all positive integers plus one new integer, guest X, is also an infinite set. The size of the two sets, in mathematical terms, is the same. This concept, known as cardinality, is what the paradox is truly about. We are taught that n plus 1 is greater than n, and this is a universal truth in our finite world. But in the world of infinity, it is not. The Grand Hotel shows us that a set can be in a one-to-one correspondence with a proper subset of itself. The set of all hotel rooms can be mapped to a set of all hotel rooms minus 1. This is a property that only infinite sets possess. But the paradox, like all great riddles, doesn't stop there. What if a bus arrives carrying not one, but an infinite number of new guests? The new guests, each with their own unique number, 1, 2, 3, and so on, all need a room. Surely, even a hotel with an infinite number of rooms couldn't accommodate an infinite number of new guests. The receptionist, unfazed, comes up with a second, even more clever solution. She once again makes an announcement to all the existing guests. This time, her instructions are different. "Attention, everyone," she says. "In order to accommodate our new guests, I ask that each of you move to the room number that is double your current room number. The guest in room 1, please move to room 2. The guest in room 2, please move to room 4. And the guest in room 3, please move to room 6. And so on. Forever." The guests, again being mathematically obedient, follow the instructions. The guest in room N moves to room 2N, and this action, in a single stroke, frees up all the odd-numbered rooms, 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on, an infinite number of them.
the infinite number of new guests can now be assigned to these infinite number of empty rooms, and the hotel remains full in a new and even more bizarre configuration. The Grand Hotel, it seems, is a space where infinity can accommodate infinity. Part 3. The philosophical and mathematical implications. The Grand Hotel paradox, while playful in its presentation, is a profound philosophical and mathematical tool. It was used by David Hilbert to make a clear distinction between our everyday intuition and the rigorous logic of mathematics. The paradox is a profound argument for the existence of actual infinity, the idea that an infinite set can be treated as a completed entity rather than just a process that goes on forever. Our everyday experience is rooted in the concept of potential infinity, where we can always imagine adding one more number to a sequence, but we can never grasp the entire set at once. The Grand Hotel, however, forces us to treat an infinite number of rooms as a complete occupied set, and in doing so, reveals its unique properties. The paradox is deeply connected to the work of the mathematician Georg Cantor, who pioneered the field of set theory. Cantor's work showed that there are different sizes of infinity, a concept that is even more mind-bending than Hilbert's hotel. The set of all integers, for example, is infinite, but it is a smaller infinity than the set of all real numbers, all integers, fractions, and decimals. The Grand Hotel illustrates the concept of a countably infinite set, a set whose elements can be put into a one-to-one correspondence with the set of all integers. The hotel rooms, the new guests, the existing guests, they are all countably infinite. The paradox proves that even though the number of new guests is infinite, it is an infinity of the same size as the hotel's existing infinity of rooms. The philosophical implications of this paradox are vast. It challenges our very notion of what size and quantity mean. In our finite world, part of a set is always smaller than the whole. But in the infinite world of the Grand Hotel, a proper subset, the even-numbered rooms, is the same size as the whole set. This is a property that only